Good evening. I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, September 7th, 2021, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in a blended format with some participants here at Casco Bay High School and others joining us via Zoom. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo.
Présente.
Mr. Burke.
Here.
Mr. Irish.
Here.
Senor Rodriguez.
Presente.
Ms. Russell Better.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow.
Here.
Mr. Youssef.
Here.
Ms. Allen. Ms. Boxer-McCumber. Ms. Chung.
Here.
Ms. Hill. Ms. Yangala. And Chair Figdor.
Here. Okay, will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, excellent. We are going to start this meeting as is customary with time for public comment on any agenda item. On any items that are not on tonight's agenda, specifically items we're not voting on. So we have added consideration of a staff vaccination mandate on our agenda. We'll get to it later tonight. So if you want to speak to us on that topic, please hold your comment until we get to it on our agenda. And with that, I'm going to open up the public comment period. The public comment period is only open to people who are Portland residents or who have a direct connection to Portland Public Schools. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and you should, for folks on Zoom, let us know you want to speak to the board by using the raise your hand feature either on the bottom of the Zoom panel or next to your name. So let's see if there's anyone who would like to speak to the board. Please raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature, and I will go ahead and call on you. Okay, so far we have one person who has raised their hand. We're going to start with Rachel. Could we move Rachel over to let her speak? And then I need to be made a co-host of the meeting, please. Okay. Rachel, go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Okay. I do not see Rachel. Greg, are you able to help see if we can get Rachel?
She's unmuted. That's what I know.
Rachel, you can go ahead. All right, we are having trouble hearing from Rachel. Greg, can you help me determine if this is a tech issue on our end?
I don't have her on my end giving me any audio either. I wonder if there's a problem with her microphone at home.
Okay. Rachel, I'm going to ask if you can try and connect a different way. And if I see your hand up again, I will move you right to the front of the queue. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period. Rachel will try and get to you during our next public comment period. I'm sorry that did not work out. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the report of the chair. And I wanted to start by talking about changes to tonight's agenda. We were going to have a board focus tonight on high school choice, and we are not going to move forward with that agenda item. Instead, we're going to spend the bulk of our meeting today on the reopening update and COVID safety protocols. We also have at the end of the board meeting, after we adjourn, on the agenda, we have a workshop on the Charter Commission. And we are very likely to delay once again that workshop, just given what we expect in terms of tonight's agenda. So it's still possible we move forward with that, but it is highly unlikely. So I just wanted to give folks a heads up in case you're waiting to hear that workshop. It's unlikely that we will go forward with it tonight. And that is it for my updates, and I'm going to move right into the report of the superintendent. The report of the students. So tonight we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Ms. Chung, who's going to provide an update on everything that's happening at Deering High School.
Hi, everyone. For my first report, I hope you all be patient with me. I brought out my special suit to give me a boost of confidence, and I hope it helps me. So, hello, school board members and Portland Public Schools community. To begin my report, I would like to say Happy Rosh Hashanah, Happy New Year. Rosh Hashanah is a Jewish holiday that celebrates the new year in the lunar calendar. It is a festive time of celebration and introspection. If you know people observing the holiday, you can say Happy Rosh Hashanah, Happy New Year, or in Hebrew, Shana Tova. Happy New Year to our Jewish community members. Next, I would like to thank every administrator, teacher, and staff member who has contributed to bringing our students back to school full-time. Students were in school for 4 consecutive days at the high school for the first time since last March in 2020. While I was very fortunate during the pandemic to have a study-conducive environment, I have not realized how much I was missing on until finishing a normal school day. While our 9th and 10th graders did get a half a day to acclimate and tour the building with their advisor, since then we've had all 4 grades together, offering chances for upperclassmen to mentor younger students. It feels great to be back together again. Now I have some general school updates to share with you. Deering's weekly schedule this year includes 2 days a week of a 40-minute advisory session where students get to meet with their advisor and take a break from their classes. We hope this group of familiar faces brings comfort to students during this difficult transition from a 1.5 years of hybrid remote learning back to full-time in-school instruction. All of our grade 9 students are taking challenging and grade level curriculum, including AP Human Geography, Algebra 1, and we have had more students than ever taking AP US History in the 10th grade. And we've adopted the inquiry-based, student-centered illustrative math curriculum for algebra, geometry, and Algebra 2. We are focused on making sure all students have access to the grade level curriculum and the supports they need to succeed. We are partnering with Deb Bicknell to learn how to be skilled facilitators. Staff and students will have opportunities to learn how to lead conversations, and we hope this will help us become a stronger and more inclusive community. Lastly, this Thursday, September 9th, upperclassmen, coaches, and club advisors will be hosting tables at our first ever activity fair to introduce activities to our underclassmen. On Friday, we will be doing a sport and club clinic that will give interested students an opportunity to see what being a part of each club is like. We are very excited to share the wide range of activities offered for our students. And to finish off my report, I would like to congratulate one of my peers, Megan Cunningham, for setting a personal record and winning the SMAA cross-country meet with a time of 20 minutes and 27 seconds in the 5,000 meter race on September 2nd. Congratulations, Megan, on your great accomplishment. And this now concludes my board report for Deering High School. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chung, and your suit definitely adds to your already impressiveness. Okay, now we're going to move to the report of the superintendent. Superintendent Batana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope everybody notices that I dressed like Ms. Chung today. I've said before that she is a role model for me, and so now she's also a dress role model. Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Wolastoqiyik, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or people of the Dawnland. We're honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we're committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. Happy Rosh Hashanah to members of the Portland Public Schools community celebrating this holiday today. Welcome back to our staff, students, and families. After 18 months of interrupted instruction, last week, all of our students returned to full-time in-person instruction in the Portland Public Schools. It was inspiring to see our staff and students together, following required health and safety guidelines and becoming a community of learners once again. In every school I visited, the mood was joyous and affirming of our decision to bring all of our students back in person. Obviously, as we've seen this year, we will have significant challenges, and we will, in short, do our first school reopening update for the year. It's a practice that we began last fall and continues into this school year. As part of our back to school effort, we hosted a parent university session for families that are new to the district. The event on August 26th was an opportunity for families to hear directly from district staff about what makes Portland Public Schools a great place to learn, as well as to learn about our school reopening plans. There was a nice turnout for this first time virtual event. We will host a back to school fair on September 18th at East End Community School. This annual event has been rescheduled from this coming weekend to the 18th. It is always a great opportunity for families to learn about PPS programming, have their questions answered, and meet many of our great community partners. I would like to recognize Executive Director for Communications and Community Partnerships, Dr. Grace Valenzuela, for her efforts on these and all of our other back to school events and materials. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all of our families that we need you to complete the free and reduced school lunch application. As many of you know, we no longer charge for school breakfasts or lunches. This is because of federal waivers that have been put in place since the start of the pandemic, making meals free for all. Additionally, the state of Maine, through the work of the legislature, enacted full reimbursement for ineligible meals even after the waivers expired. We, of course, are excited to be able to provide free meals to all of our students and remove whatever barriers might have prevented students from accessing school meals. However, significant state and federal funding for Portland Public Schools is tied to the percentage of students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Significant decreases in that number will cost the district dearly in terms of state educational programs and state educational programs and services, EPS funding, which is an equity formula calibrated to provide more money for districts with higher percentage of students with higher needs. Additionally, the district receives nearly $3 million annually in federal funds, largely tied to this indicator. Those funds support significant supplemental programming at many of our elementary schools. All of our families should have received a postcard from us asking them to complete the application, which can be done in paper form or online. Applications are confidential, and if everyone completes them, regardless of eligibility, we will remove the stigma associated with filing these forms and have an accurate measure of need in our school community. We're in the process of launching our new elementary science units this fall, beginning with the second grade unit on September 16th. These units build on the new generation science standards inquiry approach to learning. This is part of our ongoing efforts to increase access to high quality content for all of our students. And nowhere is this more important than our elementary science. Traditionally, science instruction at the elementary levels was relegated to a literacy support role or neglected. Thanks to the ongoing efforts of our vertical science team and the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Malia Nally and Science Coordinator Brooke Teller, we're shifting this paradigm. The life science units have been developed by teachers in the district, and as part of the launch, school-based teams will have time to go through the unit and resources, ask questions, and have time to plan as a team. I would now like to begin our school reopening update. As you heard earlier, last week was our first week back for students. We opened school using the health and safety protocols that were approved at our August 17th meeting, so the last meeting of the board. Students and staff are masked at all times while indoors. We promote vaccination to all eligible students and staff as the single most effective way to limit the impact of the virus in our schools. We promote physical distancing by limiting the number of students eating in the cafeteria at one time and leveraging the outdoors as much as possible for meals and instruction time. At a minimum, we guarantee 3 feet between students at mealtime at the elementary and middle school level. As you know, you approved implementing a pooled testing program in kindergarten through grade 6. To explain the benefits of this program, we hosted a parent university session last Wednesday. While the session was informative, attendance was limited to about 50 people. As a result, we are redoubling our efforts to promote and recruit families to this health and safety precaution. Additional information went out in our staff and community newsletter last week. There's a banner with pool testing information on the front of our webpage, and our schools are promoting the program with their families directly through teacher contacts and teacher and school newsletters and flyers. I cannot overstate the importance of having all of our eligible students. These are all the students cannot be vaccinated enrolled in this program. We need affirmative enrollment from families in order to have their children participate in testing. This is not something that people opt out of. You have to actually enroll. So I'm urging everyone here, everyone listening at home and otherwise, to help us promote the value of pooled testing as a way to monitor the status of the virus and tamp down on the spread of COVID in our schools. We're planning to go live on September 20th, so please make sure that you sign up before then. I checked earlier this afternoon, we have about 400 people signed up, so that's significant progress from what I shared with you over the weekend. So it's, I'm feeling good about that, but that's still only about 10% of the eligible students. One of the key benefits of participating in pool testing is reducing the need to quarantine when there's a positive case in our midst. Last week, we saw several instances where one positive case forced entire classrooms to have to go remote. Once our pool testing program is in place, the individuals in those pools will not need to quarantine and will be able to continue attending school if they test negative. We've resumed our weekly case reporting and will continue to do so throughout the year or as long as cases warrant it. You can expect it on Fridays, and it will detail the number of cases and the number of close contacts by school. Certainly, the start of the school year, even with all of the positives, no pun intended, that I mentioned earlier, has reminded us that the pandemic is not over. As a result, we're making some important adjustments to our protocols. First of all classrooms, especially those in grades 4 through 12, will have seating charts and follow those seating charts, serving as a tool to evaluate close contacts and reduce the number of contacts who may require quarantine. All classes will transition to rows with desks, tables facing the same direction, and we will maximize the distance between desks and tables as much as possible. Schools can require masking in situations outdoors where students are not able to consistently maintain at least 3 feet of distancing, such as arrivals and dismissals or recess times. While we're not requiring the strict cohorting that we did last year, we are requiring schools to limit or eliminate any interactions between classes. So for example, combining advisories and things along those lines. We're also asking schools to limit staff visits to classrooms to those that are for essential instructional staff. So for example, general ed, EL, and special ed teachers and ed techs working together in one classroom, but limiting other non-essential staff visiting classrooms to reduce exposure for students and staff, and again, limit the number of students who may need to be quarantined in case of a positive. We're asking that staff maximize outdoor learning as much as possible and make sure that classroom windows are open to increase ventilation to the maximum extent possible. And for staff meetings, we will maintain a 6-foot distance during any staff meetings, and there should be a remote option available. If we cannot ensure that, the meeting will be remote for all participants. So these are the changes that we implemented this morning as a result of our experiences this last week. Earlier today, we also asked principals to let us know how many classroom sections can meet the 3 feet requirement with their current enrollment. If a class section is not able to meet that 3 feet requirement indoors, given the space and number of students enrolled, we will need to determine the availability of outdoor space for those classes. And if not, we will need to come back with options around those situations. So this is not currently a requirement yet because we need the data to inform our decision-making and respond to the stakeholders that have asked for that. We are also working to have our remote learning guidance solidified and have clear systems in place for when we need to transition a class or a cohort of students to quarantine. So in short, we're trying to thread the needle such that we'll be able to continue to provide teaching and learning opportunities that are consistent with our pedagogy while still maintaining adherence to our health and safety protocols. The revisions that I just described were recommended by our medical team, and as always, they will continue to be revisited and revised as we learn more throughout the year. As always, we urge families to not send students to school if they're exhibiting any of the symptoms of COVID. We continue to work with Greater Portland Health to make testing available to symptomatic individuals who come to school. And we also have the ability to work with GPH to provide accessible testing to those who may not be able to access testing elsewhere. We're working with them to reestablish the Portland Street PPS only clinic as demand for this service increases. And I believe that they will be able to reopen that clinic this week. So I would like to pause and take any questions that you may have about this portion of the presentation before we move into our vaccination data.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Are there questions from the board? Ms. Thompson.
Superintendent, can you talk a little bit about those students that are quarantining or will need to quarantine and what procedures we're putting in place for homework? And I got an email from a parent asking about that today.
Yeah, so we've said this before, and what our intention is when it's individual students that are quarantined, that they will be treated as if they, as they have an excused absence. And so they will have the time to make up any work that they missed, and our teachers will work with them to make up any learning that they may have missed when they return to school. We will, in some instances, be able to provide materials while they're in quarantine. And when we can't do that, then they will get those materials and make up the work when they return to school. In instances such as the ones that we had last week and then again today, where an entire class needs to be quarantined, we are in the process of, and that was my last comment about, we are in the process of sort of determining exactly what happens in terms of, remote instruction versus asynchronous instruction. We obviously had guidelines in place last year. We don't currently have in all of our elementary schools, students have not been issued laptops and things along those lines. So being able to do remote synchronous instruction is something that we do not have the capacity to do in all instances right now. But we are in the process of tightening what those requirements will be for, when an entire class is going to be out for 10 days.
So just to follow up, so the question that was asked of me as well was, if a student, and it sounds more like maybe it can happen on the high school level, if they are quarantining, can they video in? So do the teachers all have the capabilities in their classrooms, and there's not that technology capability?
No, we are not doing that.
Okay.
And we explicitly said, as we were in the process of running our plans through before, so this is not new, that we would not be expecting people to do both synchronous and asynchronous instruction, with students who are quarantined. So if you are quarantined, you are considered to be out of school sick, in the same way that if you had the flu, you would be out sick and you would not be, coming into the classroom. So that is the way that we've said from day one that we would be treating this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. For the pool testing, do we have any idea how many students, how many parents already signed up for the pool testing?
400 as of this afternoon.
We found out this afternoon? Okay. And if we found, so are we getting close to the starting time? Because I think it was roughly around September 18th, if I remember.
We're scheduled to start on September 20th.
20th?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And my second question is the symptom check. Are we using the tool asking parents like we did last year? The symptom, we have those
symptoms check. Yeah,
yes.
On a daily basis, that is sent as a reminder to families.
Yeah, those reminders are done by the text messaging or emails, and we're getting the parents back answers.
We don't collect answers from families.
We don't get any answers.
So it is just a reminder to
just
a reminder to do the symptoms check.
Okay, so we have that one for all the grades, or we have just elementary school and middle school. Do we have that one for the high school?
We do it for everyone.
Oh, for everybody. Yeah. Okay. So for the buses, do we space our students in the transportation buses, or we are all filled up with all the seats, or is a space?
We try to do 2 to a seat, and there are some instances where there are too many students on the bus to have 2 to a seat, and so we do have some buses that are running 3 to a seat. But then in other cases, we have fewer students and there's more space in between.
Okay. Right. So
and our buses are running with our guideline is 4 windows open.
The special ed education and the BREF program, everything went for that area.
I think we're fine. I know I visited Breathe last week and things are fine. I mean, we are short on some staffing. We're about 13 ed techs short across the district, many of them in special education classrooms, some of them in Breathe. I don't remember the specifics, but we can provide that information for you.
Okay.
And I think actually Barb is going to provide some of that when we talk about the vaccination data as well.
So do we have a chance to fill up those space? Because those are areas really important with our special ed students. Missing those are 13. Those are all 13 ed techs. Is just is overall, or just on the special education?
Malia Nally is here and she can answer the specifics of that. But I know that I don't remember exactly if it's 13. Malia does.
Yeah.
But I think this was in my update to you over the weekend, that there are also somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 agency BHPs that are assigned to students enrolled in the Portland Public Schools that are unfilled at this time. So it's not just our 13 positions. There's also, everybody is facing the same challenge that we're facing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you basically hit close to what the data is as of Friday, where we have 16 positions unfilled. That was down from 19 a couple days before that. So, I mean, we've been filling very rapidly.
Okay.
And the superintendent was right. We were at 13 ed techs as of Friday and 26 BHP positions. But I mean, the team is working very carefully with the programs to make sure that they have staff through subs, through pulling and redistributing ed techs in the short term. So it's not optimal as like a sustainable solution for the long term, but they are ensuring that the staffing is appropriate for the programs for right now as we finish staffing up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Ms. Chung.
I was wondering from your update about how we were talking about there are certain classes where teachers aren't able to socially distance. Because I can think of a class that I have where it's just like quite a lot of people and we're just like not really able to hit like 2 feet. And I was just wondering how we're going to like hold administration accountable or like the way we want to go about it to guarantee that schools are socially distancing.
Well, I mean, that's where we're in the process of determining where that's happening and then seeing if those classes can be relocated. And if they can't be relocated, then we're in a position to begin to think about, do we split those classes to hybrid, where half of the students are in school and the other half are not in school, or, things along those lines. It would be great to say, like, we could just create additional sections, but, we're obviously challenged to be able to fill all of our positions as it currently is. So it might not be, I don't know if that's an AP science class or something along those lines. We don't have somebody in the wings that could just teach that class. So I think that this is the challenge that we're facing as we, as we're walking into the situation. We said very clearly that in order for us to be able to have all of our students back in person, we could not uniformly guarantee the distancing that we would like to guarantee. So it's not holding administrators accountable. They would love to be able to keep everybody distanced. I would love to be able to keep everybody distanced, but we don't have the space. So that's the issue. We don't have the space, we don't have the staff. And so, that's the reason that we are at a place where, we're trying to keep 3 feet. And in many cases, we're able to do that, but not in all cases.
Okay, thank you.
And now as we have people back and we actually know what class enrollments are going to be like, we're now in the process of determining, in which classes can we honor that 3 feet and in which classes can we not. And then we'll look at outdoors, we'll look at all of those other options for those classes to see, outdoors and, relocating to another place in the building. That makes sense?
Yes.
Mr. Burke. Thank you, Ms. Chung. Mr. Burke.
Thank you. Superintendent, can you share these updated protocols with the board in writing? Are you sure tonight? Thanks. And did you say that staff meetings will be 6 foot distance as possible?
And if not, they will be remote.
Yeah. So can we adopt that for the board meetings too, please?
We can try.
I think we have enough space, hopefully. When will the class social distancing audit, which is the term I just gave it, what you were just describing to Ms. Chung, be completed?
We just announced it today, so I don't know that we have a timeline we've not established one.
Yeah, well, you'll update us, I'm sure. And then with the pooled testing, what's the threshold for being able to implement it? I heard that 400 is looking good, but it's...
I mean, it is, there isn't a threshold per se.
Okay.
So in any pool, there needs to be a minimum of 5 swabs and a maximum of 25 swabs. So we have the ability to, if we only had, one kid in each grade in one building, we would do a single pool. And, that would be the one pool for that building. That's obviously an exaggeration. We're not going to be in that situation, but we have the ability to do that. So we're going to move forward with the people that we have, as soon as we are ready to go. And that is at this point on the 20th. I do want to point out that one of the challenges that we're facing is, we signed on to this with the understanding that we would have additional staff provided by the vendor. That has not materialized to date. So we are still working to identify people that will help us to do that work, because it is a significant amount of additional record keeping that, not swabs, but the vials that need to be scanned and, all of that kind of work, and, needs to be delivered to classrooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have not yet received word that those people have been hired. So that could potentially delay our start.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you said the Concentric was supposed to hire folks and they haven't hired them yet. And do we have any other information on that delay? Like, is it just part of the general hiring problem?
No, I mean, I think it's a general hiring problem. I don't know if Tina is available. I think that she was going.
Yes, I am. I mean, they just said when they confirm, they'll let us know. And I've been in touch. They use a staffing company, a local staffing company, Elevate. And she has not confirmed. I don't know. I remain optimistic that we'll have people in place for the 20th, but he's correct. It's not confirmed.
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. Superintendent, I just want to clarify our protocol for quarantining close contacts. On the communication that went out to Portland High School, it says that close contacts must quarantine the full 10 days, even if their test results are negative. So I want to then understand, how does that work with the pool testing? Even if we have negative pool testing results, and we're still going to require 10 full days, how does that save us keeping kids?
Yeah, Mr. Townsend, Assistant Superintendent Townsend is coming, and I know Tina can also help with this.
So, there are in the standard operating procedure 4 exceptions to having to quarantine. So it's the students students or staff that don't meet any of those exceptions that would need to quarantine for the full 10 days, even with the test. So the 4 exceptions include vaccinated, all of them have to include people who are asymptomatic, but asymptomatic individuals who are vaccinated, who've had COVID within the past 90 days, who are participants in pooled testing, and there's a universal masking exception in there that has some specifics attached to it that we're continuing to learn around in terms of implementation. But if you meet one of those exceptions, and you do not need to quarantine. If you do not meet any of those exceptions, you're required to quarantine for the full 10 days, even with a negative test. And the rationale as it relates to pooled testing is because as a pooled testing participant, you're having a regular ongoing surveillance testing on a weekly basis, as opposed to episodic testing that might be the result of a quarantine.
So just so that I can understand, then the pool testing, because it is periodic, will keep us from having to subject students who are not vaccinated, so they meet that requirement, from having the full 10-day quarantine period, as long as they have a negative test and are continue to be asymptomatic. In the high schools, that doesn't apply though, right? Because in the high schools, there's no pool testing, so every test will not be preemptive. So we will, as we've had, we will continue to have full 10-day quarantine periods for high school students, and yet a very limited way to keep them up to speed with their academics.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So for example, as you know, today we closed Portland High School. We learned about that, a case with a significant number of potential close contacts. yesterday afternoon. And so we were unable to ascertain who needed to quarantine. And so in order to ensure that we didn't have people in school that could have potentially been exposed, we closed school. Over the course of the day, our team went through 175, potential contacts and narrowed it down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 who needed to quarantine. And those were cases where students were not vaccinated. So, it requires people going through, not people, our nurses, our staff going through every individual student, going to the state's database and determining whether that person was vaccinated or not in order to be able to rule them out. And so that's a fairly time-consuming process. But to your point, we were able to take 175 without pool testing down to 30 some by virtue of the high prevalence of vaccination among our students.
That's really helpful, and I totally understand. That's not the worst case scenario, but we still have 30 some students who will be out of school without a robust way to support them academically. And I don't mean to say that that our teachers and our staff were not going to keep an eye on these students and they're not going to follow up with them. I understand that that's not the case, but we're barely 2 weeks into the school year. We should anticipate more of these quarantine episodes to happen. And it'll get to a point where, students will have such a large amount of accumulated loss of educational time that, I really think that we need to figure out, and I hate that I don't have the right suggestion, but we need to figure out a way to offer a more robust remote support for the students. And maybe that's not the right answer, but I need for the board to understand how we are really supporting these students, because these episodes of quarantine will continue to happen. And I don't think that the vaccination rates are going to have an impact, because we're seeing breakthrough cases, right? We're seeing vaccinated people that are testing positive. So it's unavoidable that we're going to see these quarantine periods exponentially grow as the year progresses. And so I just, again, will warn us, and I've been doing this for months now, that we continue to look at ways to grow our remote learning capacity.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Are there other questions from the board? I have Mr. Youssef, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the visitation, you said we limited to essential. Does that mean only parents or?
No, this is just staff. At this point, we are not allowing visitors into the schools when kids are in school, except for, a couple of exceptions. If there's an IEP meeting, which is not happening in a classroom, it's happening in a office or something along those lines, or when a new family is coming to see the school that they're going to be sending their child to. So our get acquainted visits that we do, those are the only times that we're having non-staff come in. My revision that I shared is that, we have folks that are visiting classrooms that are, for example, literacy coaches or math coaches and so on. And so that's something that we're not going to do based on these latest requirements. We actually may even have to go further at some point and not have, part of, and this is what I said earlier about threading the needle between what we want to do from a pedagogy perspective and what we're able to do given where we are. We now, this year, as a result of the work that we did last year and that was funded in the budget, have a significant number of ELL teachers that are pushing in and working side by side with the regular classroom teacher day in and day out. But those people sometimes are split between 3 different third grade classes or, 4 different fourth grade classes. And so, at this point, we're still allowing that to happen, but that is something that down the road we might have to revisit if as a result of that, we're having, additional transmission within the schools.
So, follow up that in the case.
Could I just make a clarification?
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's not additional transmission, it's additional potential exposure.
Exposure, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So in the case that we know someone is coming, is it possible to ask their vaccination status so that we can take more precaution?
So we do that, for example, for volunteers. We're requiring that any volunteer that comes into our schools be vaccinated. We're doing that for student teachers. They need to be vaccinated. But we are not at this point asking a parent who's coming to visit the school that their child is going to be going to be vaccinated. We're not asking for their vaccination status. We are requiring that they wear masks. We are requiring that they socially distance. Those are short visits. They're not coming and spending, an hour in the classroom. They're just coming around and meeting the teacher and seeing the classroom and leaving. So, it does not rise to the threshold of even being a close contact if we were then to find out that the person was, had COVID or something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Ms. Russell-Better.
Superintendent, I feel really hopeful about the pool testing. So happy to hear about how that's moving along. I just had a question because of hearing issues from families and staff regarding access to testing. And I did hear you mention the Greater Portland Health. So this might relate to my question, but has it been considered to find a way for us to access rapid tests to be able to
I saw
use
Tina pop in, so.
for students and staff?
Tina, can you answer that, please?
So students and staff can be referred to Greater Portland Health. They have dedicated Portland Public School hours.
Okay.
So all they have to do is talk to their school nurse or me if they're in a building where there's not a nurse. And nurses do have, most of the buildings, the nurses do have access to some rapid testing. For particular cases, there is a concern that there may be limits on the availability of Binax, which we are going to need for pool testing. So it is not just because someone, might feel anxious about something or whatever. We really want to use it for symptomatic people who meet criteria to be tested for COVID, but that can be done by the nurse.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I was thinking of it particularly in the quarantining cases, that families have just mentioned challenging getting access.
Yep.
So you're saying any family that's part of Portland Public Schools could request through the school nurse access to go to Greater Portland Health. That's how they would do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So I can just speak to that too, as part of Greater Portland Health. So we've opened this testing site last year at 28 Portland Street for this very reason, to provide low barrier, free of cost COVID testing, both rapid and PCR testing. And given the high needs, we're reopening that site for this reason. So specifically for symptomatic students or staff, or for people who need a test because they're identified as close contacts and need assistance in getting a test.
Thank you. So that has started now.
So currently we have that option that we're doing through our 180 Park Avenue site for Greater Portland Health. But because the testing needs have been so high, even within 4 days, we're going to reopen 28 Portland Street. So the Portland Public School building testing site on Thursday.
Thank you. So Superintendent, is that something that's going to be shared through school buildings for staff and student families to be aware of that opportunity?
Yes.
Okay, but that's newly available, it sounds like. So, okay, that would just be my request, that as families, staff have shared that concern with me, I would want, to know that information is getting out there. And I understand there's probably the capacity issue too, but just for us to be, if we're going to be doing the quarantine, that's going to be part of our process to know that people have access to testing. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Just to follow up to that, is probably, I don't know who can answer this, but did we say that there might be an interruption in supply of the Binax test, or that there's a concern for the supply? Maybe I misheard.
I said that, but Gita, can you speak?
Sure, I can. So we don't know specifically. Certainly there was some media attention to a question of a shortage of Binax tests. There are other rapid tests as well. And, as part of the school health advisory committees that Tina and I both participate in, the state has said that they are, actively seeking additional supplies for rapid testing. So we don't exactly know that answer. And I think that, we are monitoring it the best that can be done. Tina certainly is to access rapid tests within the capacity of the state.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I have some additional questions following up on pool testing and testing through Greater Portland Health. So maybe Dr. Gita, I'll stick with you for a second. I'm wondering if I heard the criteria under which we're referring students to Greater Portland Health. So it sounds like students and staff that are who are symptomatic or who are close contacts based on their presence in our buildings. I'm wondering if a student has a close contact outside of school, would we also refer them to Greater Portland Health? Could they also get testing through Greater Portland Health?
At this point, they can. I think we're watching, our capacity. Our priority is to ensure that we get the tests done needed to quickly and effectively contact trace. So that's our number one priority. And then our number two priority is to provide those tests for people who have been identified as close contacts that have hardship in getting a test. So I think if someone had hardship in getting a test in that situation, that we would welcome them to be referred by their school nurse to our site. And for close contacts, we do PCR testing.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. And then in the case that students or staff are identified as close contacts, do we alert them directly about the availability of testing through Greater Portland Health? I know the letter, the standard letter that goes out to the school community just has a general list of testing options and doesn't specifically talk about the availability of testing through Greater Portland Health.
We tell them to contact the school nurse for assistance with setting up a test. And we have been doing most of this by phone calls, although we just started with text this week, and let them know that just verbally that we have, a relationship with Greater Portland Health for testing. But the referral does have to go through the nurse. They don't set it up directly through Greater Portland Health.
And is the testing through Greater Portland Health free for all the students and staff who we refer, or
yes, it's free for students and staff. So we do submit insurance claims if someone has insurance, and insurances generally will cover the cost, and that is what we did last year as well. And then for the community who is uninsured, we do not submit claims and we do not charge any cost for that testing.
Thank you. It's a great partnership. So thank you so much for all that you're doing, Dr. Gita. It's an awesome resource to have. Mr. Superintendent, I was wondering, of the students and staff who tested positive so far, have they tended to be vaccinated or not?
For the most part, yes.
For the most part, they've tended to be vaccinated.
Yes.
Thank you. So that gets me back to pool testing and kind of the critical role that it can play. And so I have some follow-up questions, and I understand the challenges with the vendor. But I'm wondering first, I've heard, so my question is, are classroom teachers in the pools?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Is there, I understand that right now there's a worker shortage, but assuming that we're able to get the program up and running, could we then work to expand it to our middle schools and high schools so that we're doing this surveillance level testing of all of our students and staff?
Yes.
And what would it take for us to kind of affirmatively move in that direction? Would it just be, starting the program in our K through 6 classrooms and having it families opt in and it work well? And then from there, is there a process with the state that we have to go through?
I don't believe so. Tina, I think we're authorized we had to go and get approved and we've done that. But I don't think that's specific to a grade level. But I should just shut up and let Tina answer.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're approved as a district. So for any grades.
And then in other districts in Maine, have they tended to focus on the unvaccinated population, or are there in other districts there's a broader approach? I mean, clearly it makes sense to start where our students aren't able to get vaccinated, but just given the level of the cases we've already seen and how that's impacted our schools, it's if I'm thinking about how do we keep our schools open, it feels like this strategy is our most in addition to all the precautions we're layering, this one additional surveillance testing could be the one that enables us to keep our schools open. So I'm wondering, what are other districts doing in terms of who they're including in their pools?
So I don't know all districts in the state, and I don't know, Tina, if you have broader information. We did a survey among Cumberland and York County superintendents. Very few districts are actually moving forward with pool testing at this point. And those who are doing it with younger students because they can't be vaccinated, and with athletes, with team sports and things like that, where one positive could cause the whole team to not be able to compete, and this limits it to those who test positive. But that's I haven't looked at it in the last week or so, but when I looked at it last, that's the majority were not doing it, and those who are doing it, and that's just for Cumberland and York County.
And then if we were able to move forward with a successful program and expand it, do we need to follow the state protocol in terms of how often we are doing the pools? Like, would there be a possibility to more rapidly retest pools?
I think we can. I'm not really sure. I would have to check, but I think it is up to the district to make those decisions.
Okay, thank you so much.
I don't know obviously it would cost more, so.
But right now the state is picking up the cost of the
right, correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nurse Tina. Thank you, Superintendent. Are there other questions from the board? Okay, I think we're good to move on.
Right. So, as I said, we were going to move into a discussion about staff vaccination rates. So, as you know, we're required by the Maine Department of Health and Human Services to report these data monthly going forward. More importantly, members of the board have raised the possibility of requiring staff to be vaccinated in the way that employers all across the state and country have done, including the city of Portland and Maine Med locally. I had asked the board to hold on making any decision on this issue until we knew the magnitude of the situation. As you know, we were advised by our medical staff that rates in the 80+ area would be needed to achieve community or herd immunity. I do want to be clear that that is not like a scientific unanimous decision. There is some There are some organizations that have said that. Other organizations, including the CDC, have said that it's hard to determine, and they've not taken a stand on that. In any case, today, Executive Director of Human Resources, Barb Stoddard, will present the results of an exhaustive data collection effort among our staff. She'll explain the process that we followed and provide the results. And I've also asked Barb to provide data on our current staffing shortfalls to some of the questions that Board Member Bondo was asking earlier, so that you have all of that information as you approach this issue. I want to commend Barb for the incredible amount of time and effort that went into organizing and managing this pursuit. I also want to thank the frontline managers across the district, principals, assistant principals, and department heads who individually did everything they were asked to do to help Barb with the collection of these data. Our goal with this presentation tonight is for you to have the best information that you need to tackle this challenging topic. We do not have a recommendation. As we look at all of the data, we see pros and cons to any action that you may take. And I trust that as a deliberative body, you will weigh all the pros and cons and make the best decision for our community, as you have done time and again throughout this pandemic. I also want to point out that having the data also included our executive session earlier today with our legal counsel to understand the legal do's and don'ts associated with vaccine mandates. So I'm going to turn it over to Barb, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Thank you so much. Let me. Okay. So tonight we're going to share an update on the collection of, the collection of our staff vaccination data. I'll share some information about the process and the results of the data that we collected. And again, we hope that this will help you have an informed conversation about an employee vaccine mandate.
And the presentation is included in the board packet, so you can follow along there if it's easier for you.
Before we get into the details of the data itself, I want to share just a little bit about the process for collecting the data, the operating definitions that we used to describe the different groups of employees, and what we'll be reporting to the state at the end or by the end of this week. Our process for gathering the data really hinged upon work completed by our building administrators and department heads, as the superintendent has said. And I would consider this the ultimate version of a team effort. It was really, it could not and would not have been successful if just HR were trying to collect this information on our own, or if we had tried to do this through a voluntary survey. Staff lists were shared with supervisors, and then supervisors were asked to talk to their staff and ask their staff to voluntarily show vaccination cards. This information was collected over about a 10-day period on confidential lists that were then shared back with HR. And this is what allowed me to compile all the data that you're going to see tonight. When you view the data, you'll see a number of references there to temporary employees. So this is really a catch-all term that we use to capture staff that we consider temporary in nature. Includes people like substitute teachers, our building aides, tutors, contract employees, coaches, and people who run student activities. They're not our regular staff, but they're in the data that we will be turning into the state. When we reviewed all the district-wide data, we did so through the lens of really looking at our regular staff, which excluded about 190 temporary employees that are spread really across the district. That said, for state reporting purposes, we are required to include temporary staff in the total figures that we're reporting. So I will share information about our temporary staff on a separate slide a little bit later in the presentation. Additionally, if you look at what's in board documents, there's detailed data there that shows information about everybody, including all of our temporary staff. Finally, the state reporting requires pre-K through grade 12. So Portland Adult Ed data, which you will see reflected in the data that we collected, is not going to be submitted to the state when we do our reporting to the state. So this is the first slice of data that I'm going to share with you. It's an overall look at all of our regular staff, pre-K through adult ed by employee type. And just as a reminder for these employee categories, the PEA group is really a broad category of educators. It goes beyond classroom teachers. It includes roles such as social workers, guidance counselors, nurses, therapeutic specialists, so it's a pretty broad group. The PAA are our building principals, assistant principals, our athletic directors, the director and assistant directors of Portland Adult Ed, and our Breathe program. I think everybody is clear on our educational technicians. They work across our buildings in a variety of educational settings. The base group includes building secretaries, our computer technicians, food service staff, custodial and maintenance staff, and our transportation employees. And then the non-represented group includes district office leadership, other district office roles, and department heads across the district. As shown here, our vaccination rates among building-based staff are really quite high, and our vaccination rate for all of our regular employees is 92%. The next two slides will show a deeper dive by grade span. So this slide is an overview of all regular staff at our elementary level schools. We have really strong vaccination rates among our elementary school buildings, with an overall vaccination rate of 94%. This slide shows the breakdown for middle school and high school. Again, the vaccination rates at the secondary level are also strong. Middle school at 96% and high school at 92%. I also wanted to share a couple of additional pieces of data about two Portland Schools programs that you're seeing on this slide. As I mentioned, Portland Adult Ed will not be submitted to the DOE this week, but this is specific data for that location that you're seeing. Additionally, I'm sharing pre-K program data here. All the staff and the vaccination data shown here for pre-K are actually captured in our elementary school data that is above. So this is just additional data, a breakout of additional data. Those classrooms, all of our own classrooms, as well as partner sites, have a dedicated school that they're connected to, and that's where the data lives. It's buried in that data that I was showing you. What I did is just pull this out so you could see the pre-K data for informational purposes here. So this is our district office and other non-building locations. See that on the slide. Our custodians and food service staff who work in buildings are reported on building lists, and they're not part of the district level capture, which is why those numbers are fairly low in these categories here. This is the snapshot of all the temporary staff that were working that we collected at the end of last month. Again, this is a mix of roles, substitute teachers, building aides, coaches, and other types of employees. The vaccination rate for this group is a bit lower than what we're seeing with our regular staff. I'm going to just jump over to the staffing numbers here. As was mentioned earlier, we have approximately just under 50 vacancies still. The breakdown of those positions you can see on the right side of the slide here. We do have some hires in progress of these numbers, and we filled, I'd say, more than 20 positions just in the last week. However, we remain concerned about the number of ed tech vacancies, and as mentioned earlier, we also have a large number of BHP roles that agencies have not been able to fill, so those numbers are concerning. We also have staff shortages in food service and with custodial staff, and in particular with our transportation department. So that is a lot of data to digest in a short amount of time. And again, there's even more deeper data and detailed data in the board docs. I'm happy to answer questions now, or if you want to take a look at the data and send me questions, I'm happy to answer that. We'll be submitting our first report to the state prior to the Friday deadline, and the vaccination reports will be submitted monthly on an ongoing basis.
What questions? Thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. What questions do board members have? Ms. Bando.
Thank you so much. Just a little clarification on the pre-K with the community, with our partner communities. Can you just remind me how many classroom, which partners, community partners, are we having the collaboration with our pre-K and having our class in their site?
I'm sorry, are you asking?
Just how many off-site community partners
Yes.
we have? I know that Malia can answer that. So we obviously have the one down here, which is part of Catherine Morrill. There's YFO and
Children's Odyssey.
Children's Odyssey.
Catherine Morrill. Fit for?
So
that's right. No longer as, sorry.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the 38 here on the total staff count is everything combining with that?
Yes.
I'm sorry, which number are you looking at?
The pre-K staff here. On the additional PPS detail data.
That is all of the staff that work in pre-K classrooms
Plus the one is on the other side.
in the district and with partner sites.
Okay,
Yep.
so like we have, yeah, okay. Now my sub question is that, do we share, because we have a class on those different sites, who are not a public school, are we sharing some information because we have a class, we have our classroom in this site, so they have also employees, they have a staff. So are we sharing information about if we know if the staff are fully vaccinated or not, or we just having our own count? Staff to be, because we have our student there.
We're just capturing our own employees' data.
Interesting.
And we also, for example, don't know of the BHPs that are actually in our schools, how many of them are vaccinated.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you. Just, and then another one, maybe I should know that, but when we have the 1 year teachers, are we consider them to be on the temp employee or not?
They're regular staff.
Those are regular staff.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bando. Are there other questions from the board? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, do you have any concluding remarks to?
That concludes our report.
Okay, excellent. We are now moving to the report of the secretary, consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of August 17th, 2021. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Youssef. Are there any questions on the motion? All right, is there any public comment on the motion? So this is specifically on the minutes from our last meeting. Seeing no public comment, I'm going to close public comment. Is there any board discussion on the minutes? Yes, Mr. Burke.
I have a friendly amendment. Julia Hazel's title should be with a capital I in BIPOC as it stands for Indigenous, and it's currently not capitalized.
Mr. Superintendent, can we make that correction?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Burke, for pointing that out. Okay. If there's no further board discussion, we can move to a vote. By roll call, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the meeting minutes from our August 17th, 2021 meeting. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Irish,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Chung,
Yes.
And Chair Figdor.
Yes, so the minutes are passed unanimously with Ms. Chung, our student rep here tonight, voting with the majority. Okay, now as I mentioned earlier, we are not doing the board focus on high school choice tonight. I expect that we'll likely do it at our next board meeting later this month. So we are moving right to consent items. And Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. Required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude, as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance, including $390 from Cumberland County Federal Credit Union for new higher orientation at PPS. We're very grateful to the Cumberland County Federal Credit Union for their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you so much. Now we're moving on to new business, and we have consideration and action to require vaccination for PPS employees. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, is there a second? Ms. Russell-Better. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to speak to this motion? Okay. I believe this motion has been brought to us by this motion has been brought to us by Ms. Russell-Better and Mr. Burke. So perhaps you can present to us what you are proposing. And then I think I will ask the board to, as Ms. Russell-Better and Mr. Burke speak to the motion for the board to consider whether we could move on this tonight rather than the customary first read and second read, if we could move forward and take action tonight. And so if that is something that you are going to object to, if you can let me know, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. And I may need some parliamentary help along the way here. I just wanted to speak to the motion, and this resolution is in our board docs information for people to reference. But just wanted to share a little bit about why I came to wanting to address this tonight. The resolution, which is entitled Resolution Celebrating the District's Current COVID-19 Vaccination Rates and Affirming the Portland School Board's Commitment to Full Vaccination for Staff beginning in the school year 2021-2022. And I just wanted to start by saying how grateful I am to live in this community where we can see from the rates that Ms. Stoddard just shared that folks in our community, our school community, are taking COVID-19 very seriously. And I'm really so grateful for the tremendous work that all of our staff are doing to keep kids safe. So I want to start with saying that. And also just acknowledging this 18 months that we've all been through as a community and around the world. I just think we need to acknowledge the trauma that everybody has been through, and it's continuing on. And I think really our only way out of it is for us to do as much as humanly possible to stop this virus in its tracks. So where I'm coming from is I just keep going back to that I was elected to serve and advocate for the students in this community, first and foremost. And so my intent is always keeping the most marginalized kids and families at the center of what I do. And so I'm always thinking about those students who are immunosuppressed, students whose families have very high COVID exposure in their home communities where they live and workplaces that their family members have to go to work to every day. And so when I keep that in mind when I say that, yes, adding more protocols do add complexity and greater challenge to our staffing, and seeing all the work that our district staff is doing day in and day out in our buildings, I realize that this does add another layer, and that's not a small thing. But I just feel like we owe it to our students and families to do everything that's in our power. And I feel like really pushing to expect vaccination for our staff is one piece of the layers of protection that we can do as a district. And lastly, as we discuss, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the resolution as put forth, my intent is not to be punitive, but to have high expectations of vaccination and offer opportunities and support for staff to get there. So that's where I'm coming from today. I don't know if Mr. Burke wanted to speak. Thank you.
Okay, let me clarify the process. So as is typical when we consider motions, thank you, Ms. Russell-Better, for explaining the motion. We are now going to go into questions from the board on the motion. After the board has concluded its questions, we'll move to public comment. And that's when the public will have an opportunity to participate in the conversation, specifically around staff vaccination mandates and this proposal. And then we will go to board discussion and then a vote of the board. And I see a question from Ms. Chung. Go ahead, Ms. Chung.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Russell-Better, and thank you for the work the two of you put together on putting forth this motion. I just had one concern that I wanted to bring up that I think would be useful to discuss, I guess, as a board, is whether or not, since we're already pretty low staffed, and that's one of the reasons why we have limited social distancing in certain circumstances, if we put forth this motion to force vaccinations on certain people, would that cause certain employees to leave our district and then us having even more limited social distancing, such as our base employees who are at like 80%? And if those 20% of people, if some of them aren't comfortable with getting vaccinated and they leave us, will our buses be even more squished and students won't be able to social distance even more? Something to think about.
And perhaps Ms. Chung, you want to pose that to Ms. Stoddard or to the superintendent for their input on it?
I guess either of them, whether or not like we need to like survey base employees.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely one of the, one of the considerations for the board to take as you think about this. I want to put this in very real terms. So for example, transportation right now is down 9 staff members out of an approximate staff of 50. So we're running at about 80% of our staff right now. And there's a 25% of the remaining that are not vaccinated. If all of those people left us, that means we would basically have half of our transportation department. And just so that there's no, confusion about this, that would mean we would not be able to run transportation in the district. So we would either have to go remote or everybody would have to figure out how to get their kids to school. We would not be able to do that. So I just want to be very clear about that. Now, we don't know that everybody is going to leave. So this is what's impossible for us to determine. But we are the only district at this point that is considering a vaccine mandate. So all of our bus drivers would have the ability to go to any other district, and there's already a shortage of bus drivers everywhere, would have the ability to go and hire on in any of those districts without the vaccine requirements. So, I think to answer your question, that is a concern. We also heard about the shortages of ed techs specifically, right? So again, we have about 25 ed techs in our pool that are not currently vaccinated, on top of the 13 vacancies that we have. Again, if all of them left, that would create a very substantial shortfall of people that are doing day-to-day support for our students. So I do think that is important for the board to take into consideration. I don't know, Barb, if there's anything you want to add to that?
The only thing I would add is this is not a Portland problem. So there are other districts are obviously hiring in the same way that we are. I did talk to a colleague in a Southern Maine district recently, very much smaller district, and they have 25 ed tech vacancies. So it's critical everywhere. And I agree that there are options for people to go elsewhere if they choose to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Mr. Irish.
Can I just piggyback off your question? When HR collected the information or the supervisors collected the information, was it just a standard, are you or aren't you vaccinated? Or were you able to glean whether or not those who weren't had a particular reason that was outside of a medical condition?
So for the
Or you're
most
not
part,
allowed to ask
we
that?
did not collect any medical information. There's also there's no's and then there's unknowns. That it's all no's to the state, but there are people who didn't respond. And so right now, again, so next month, we would go back to that group of unknowns and no's and say, is anything different? Which is part of the reason we wanted to collect abroad all of the data so that we don't have to keep asking the same people again and again. And so now we've narrowed that down. But we did not collect specific, any medical reasons or other reasons why people chose not to get vaccinated.
Thank you, Mr. Irish. Ms. Bondo.
Yes, I just want to have a follow-up what Mr. Irish just mentioned. So something just get to me, because do we have any data priority to what we have received? So at least we can compare one, because I see we have 100 bonus and we are proposing to staff to get vaccinated. Just to compare, since we applied those bonus, did we see any change? Did the rate of the vaccinated was increased or not?
We didn't have that.
Right.
Yes,
It was
we didn't
announced
have that one.
No, it wasn't. The bonus was announced at the time that we said we were going to be collecting the vaccination data.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I know of one person who said that the $100 tipped them over to the decision. So
again, no, I mean, it was not. I didn't hear you.
oh, anecdotally, I know one person who actually went and got vaccinated because they wanted the $100.
Because of the bonus. Okay.
That was reported by a principal. So
yeah, okay. So I mean, if we go back a month from now, going back to collect with those no right now and getting more people educated, what's the value behind it? So that's the time we can get some comparison to see, okay, that's the way you worked.
So I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but I will say that we have a number of people who are in the process of getting vaccinated. So I think even just us moving to collect the data did move some people.
Yeah.
And so of course we still have to count them as no's this month because they're not 2 weeks past. But when we get to October and report September's data, we'll have more people in this group. So we have people that are in progress.
All right. So my question to thank you so much. So are you feel comfortable, because after see the data collect here, you have some of the staff being here 100% vaccinated. So it was something, it was unbelievable, something I was not expecting to see this to our public school. So how do you feel yourself comfortable?
I don't think it matters how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, but how you see then, those are the good
I think
reports.
it's a very high rate of vaccinations. I'm incredibly proud of our staff. I think that, when we started this, we did not, what we had when we surveyed people informally was, that there was high vaccination rates, but we didn't have full, 100% participation in the survey. We now are pretty darn close to that. And, it's really impressive. But I don't know what that actually says, because again, there is no specific standard or what you need to have, I think Chair Figdor asked the question about, those initial cases that we've had, and a significant number of them are among the vaccinated. So, I think there's high, I don't remember exactly, and maybe Dr. Gita knows this, or Tina, I think our zip codes are in the high 90%. So our data is consistent with our region. We're, heavily, a heavily vaccinated region. So, I think all of that is great, but I don't know, I'm not this is not a feeling thing. This is, a factual thing. I really, it's great data.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Ms. Pondo.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Stoddard, do we have access to the data that differentiates the unknowns and the knows? Okay. Is there any way that just to contextualize these knows? And then I guess we can follow up next month and see if there's a difference in that. But
I can go through the data and compile it for you if you want to. I don't have it at my fingertips, but it's available.
it might. If you don't have it ready and available, I don't feel like I want you to go through the trouble of getting it. Because the numbers, my next questions will illustrate, is a really small number altogether. But it'll be good to see next month if the nose grow and if the nose grows, good. If the nose grows and if it's because of the unknowns reporting or newly vaccinated folks.
No, but it will only get better.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
It
what I
can't
mean.
get worse.
But it'll be either that the unknowns were actually vaccinated or that knows got vaccinated. That'll be the two ways that number will increase, which will both be incredibly
That's
positive.
right.
So I guess questions would be, do we currently offer any vaccine clinic opportunities?
Tina, I don't know if you're still with us.
I can actually, Tina's been advising me on this, but do you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Gita.
Okay. So we are working through plans for Pfizer COVID vaccines. For the high schools, 3 high schools, we have plans for weekly vaccine availability. So for Casco Bay, for Deering and Portland, starting this Thursday at Portland. And every week in September, we have a standing date for that Pfizer vaccines will be available on site through the school-based health centers. And so next is approaching the middle schools, which I will be doing. But for the high schools, we have communication with the nurses and principals and are about to launch that on Thursday.
Excellent. Thank you.
And those are open to staff as well, if anybody wanted to get vaccinated.
Great. Thank you. Next question is, if we wanted to offer PTO or paid time off, that is something that would need to be bargained, I'm assuming. So for it to be included in a resolution could potentially put us in a binding position.
I don't think that would be problematic to have
I figured that.
Organizations accept an offer of PTO.
Yeah, the board would have to understand, obviously what that would mean financially to decide that is. I would advise that the board have that information before we give something like that away. And then opportunities. So the incentives, we already said those are already in place, and anecdotally we have at least one person. But I know that the reporting, I whatever. I think it makes sense if I get paid $100 to show a little card, I'm first in line. Last, I guess, question is, well, actually, I'll wait till we get to the comments, and then I'll share more of my thoughts. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Trevorrow.
Has our hazard pay ended at this point? And so right now, the kind of only incentive to get vaccinated, if you're not already, is the $100 bonus. And have we thought at all about, or, like a reenacting hazard pay or some kind of other ways to make the positions more attractive that we're struggling to find or struggling to fill?
No.
Okay. And then I was also wondering to kind of follow up on the question about, hiring. Is there, because we're not the only district or industry struggling with hiring right now, is there data out there to suggest that there is a strong correlation between requiring vaccinations and trouble hiring?
I don't know. Barb, do you know? I don't know.
No, I'd say it's mostly anecdotal at this point.
Mostly anecdotal. And then conversely, is there any data to suggest that, people are not are reluctant to enter workforces where they're exposed or where there are no vaccination requirements. Again, probably anecdotal. So we don't really have a strong sense data-wise of why or any correlation between the two.
I mean, the only thing I would say is when you look at what's going on nationally, right? We know that there are issues where people have put mandates in place. It's created, a lot of problems for many employees who don't want to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was information in the popular media about Chicago, where transportation, a requirement that all workers in the Chicago public schools be vaccinated, and 10% of the transportation workforce quit. So that's, one data point.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many people did not, how many people went and applied for positions that were open in their transportation department now that they had a vaccine mandate.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke. Thank you, Ms. Trevorrow.
Thank you. In the resolution is an idea that comes from what we saw precedented in Millinocket, which was creating an opportunity for people to receive rather personalized education with the questions they had to get vaccinated. So this idea of a hotline or virtual or in-person educational opportunities is rooted in that. And I'm just curious about our capacity to have such a what's our capacity to do that here in the district or through Greater Portland Health, or what opportunities already exist for staff who have vaccine hesitancies to get their questions answered as part of outreach and education?
I think that, if that is a part of the resolution, we will endeavor to do what we're directed to do. I think it'll be an added requirement and burden on staff who are already, feeling fairly stressed and stretched thin. But if we have if the board has a belief that level of, personalized education is something that would help, we will definitely give it a go. And clearly, I think our experience is that, educating people is a good thing. So we would,
it's kind of our business.
It's a good thing for us to believe that.
Yeah.
But it will be an added task for us to take on. And I don't know, Tina, if you popped up, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that or. Okay.
No, nothing else through Greater Portland Health that's available for those kind of questions.
Well, I would say that, we have school-based health centers for the high schools and for one middle school. We have weekly Pfizer vaccines, and starting Thursday for Portland and next week for Deering and Casco. And then we're going to work towards the middle schools. And we have a provider available, for during all of those clinics. We have a medical provider on site, and we welcome questions if someone wanted to come down and talk to a medical provider. So I think that would be an option, from our perspective in terms of support for staff deciding.
Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah,
and clearly from the perspective that somebody would not be able to work because they didn't have the vaccine, it would be highly motivated to get additional information if that was the reason, and we would be highly motivated to provide them that additional information. So
yeah, okay. And this is part jokey, but the board wasn't counted in our staff count of vaccinations, nor am I sure if we're eligible for the $100. Are we?
I claim to be first, though.
I don't know who would go around looking at your cards. I'd have
Got mine on.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Ms. Thompson.
And I'm sorry, Superintendent, and it may have been covered. We counting vaccinated as if they're fully vaccinated, and if they've gotten a first shot, they are still considered unvaccinated at this time because they're not at that window, correct? Okay. I get a thumbs up. Okay.
Just noting that Ms. Stoddard gave a thumbs up from a seat, so the folks on Zoom did not see that. Yeah. But yes, she confirmed that it's only people who are staff who are fully vaccinated are counted as vaccinated in this data.
So in that, Ms. Stoddard, do we know how many, if any, are underway?
We do. So it's captured, supervisors captured information where it was available. I don't have it. I didn't tally it, but I could do that for you.
Okay. I'm just curious as to the first shot underway of those that have said that they're unvaccinated. But then also I would be, if depending on what happens, I guess tonight, I guess whether you give someone $100 or $200 or $1,000, if some people philosophically just don't want to do it, no matter what we can say or educate. So I think that's kind of, what we're left with at this moment is, while I think it would be interesting to find out the numbers between philosophical and medical, in the medical, I'm sure that we would, all discuss that further and see what, if any, accommodations we can make. But I'm just wondering the philosophical part of it. If people are digging in, I know that.
So I think, I'm not sure if there's a question there, but I think.
I guess is there an opportunity to find out why?
If you mandate staff vaccinations, we will know who has a medical reason why they can't.
So I guess I'm asking if we pass this tonight, but with maybe a different date or with a caveat that this information come back to the board of those that are unvaccinated, are they underway and or are they intending to, no matter what, not get it because of philosophical reasons, so we can weed out those that are medical, if any, and then those that have first shots, because our numbers may be even lower. So I'm just curious as to, do you think that would be any big?
I would ask legal counsel, Melissa, I don't know the answer to this genuinely. Can we ask people why aren't you vaccinated?
So I guess
Melissa, will you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Melissa Huey, counsel for the district. And I guess that you could ask people for that, but that is not something that we recommend because you're asking people for more medical information than you might be entitled to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Chung.
This is just a follow-up from Ms. Thompson's question. So if we were not advised to ask people why aren't you vaccinated, would it be better if we asked people if there was a vaccine mandate, would you get the vaccine then? Would that be enough motivation? Or what would you do? Would that be something better?
Again, I'm going to turn to Melissa on that issue because I'm not sure. I guess let me just ask you first. Would you suggest we do that specifically to the people that said that they're not vaccinated? Because then it's kind of the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure it's exactly the same thing because you're not really asking them for medical information. You're sort of asking more for what they're planning to do with their career. I mean, it's a little bit of a slightly different nuance.
I do think in general, it's just that if we're trying to come up with these solutions without really knowing what the root of the problem is, like why people aren't vaccinated, then we're putting a lot of effort and energy in programs such as personalized education when we don't even know if that's something that's going to help.
And how would we ask the question without it being what Ms. Thompson said, which is asking people why they're not vaccinated? What would the alternative? That's where I'm not clear what the alternative would be, other than going to the people that we know are not vaccinated because they reported, either they didn't report or they reported that they're not vaccinated, and saying, in essence, why are you not vaccinated?
So wouldn't the question be something more like, is there anything that we could do to help you make the choice to be vaccinated? And if the answer to that is no, then I think you can make a reasonable inference that if you required it, they would leave. If the answer to that is yes, then you can target your response to what people need.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Ms. Thompson.
I'll follow up on Ms. Chung now. Do we have any idea of if we were to pose this question ASAP and then call a special board meeting to hear that data and then decide on the resolution or not? Or do you think that that's something we could turn around pretty quickly where it is such a small amount of people? And then the board could vote on the resolution maybe in a special meeting in the very, next week or so, or that's something we could pull off?
So I guess I would be, I don't know the answer to that. I am really hesitant to go back and have our administrators have to manage this, which means then maybe you're asking me to create some kind of a survey for all of the no's. So I just need to look at that and see what it would take to put something like that together. And then we would see what the response is, right? So we're probably not going to get 100% response from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that would probably be how I would approach it.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I have a question for the superintendent, which is, I'm presuming that as we see cases in schools and we know Delta is different than what we dealt with last year. So as we get further into the school year and we see how cases manifest in our schools, I would assume that, so far we're seeing more cases among folks who are already vaccinated. I would assume that if that were to change and we had the situation where we were seeing unvaccinated staff causing classrooms to quarantine, that that knowledge would be brought to us in terms of just understanding how the pandemic is unfolding in our buildings, and we could respond accordingly.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? You have a question?
Yeah. But I don't want to, because it's a question about the resolution and the enactment of the resolution that I want to understand before you move forward, and want to make sure that the board understands it as well.
Okay. Please go ahead, and then we'll go to Mr. Rodriguez.
So my question is, in the resolution where it says that staff who have been granted medical exemptions under the ADA will be exempt from this requirement. And then it goes on to say staff who are granted an exemption must provide proof of weekly negative COVID tests with the cost to be covered by the employee. What I don't understand is what is envisioned for staff who are not granted an exemption but are not vaccinated. Is the plan for them to be terminated, or is the plan for them to be asked to get weekly testing at their own expense?
Superintendent, can I just clarify see if I understand what you're asking. So, are you asking if they would not do the weekly testing? What would be
No, I'm asking the resolution specifically speaks, and I understand completely that people who are not vaccinated, who have a medical exemption, will be required to test weekly at their own expense. But I don't know what happens to the people who are not granted an exemption. So is it the fact that there's nothing there, does that mean that we're supposed to terminate them on November 1st?
So are you saying someone who has a medical reason?
Someone who does not have a medical reason.
Right. That's not stated here. So, I think it's not stated here because I really think we do have such low numbers that I think my intent for this was to, as we're discussing here, do every piece possible to encourage all of the people to get vaccinated as possible, but with it being an expectation of all staff. But I didn't have that piece of exact by this date you'd be terminated. So I guess,
from my perspective, implementing it, I need to have clarity from the board before we.
Understandable.
Today.
I think that is missing. I think I wanted to have more discussion about that, I guess, with colleagues to see what could be a resolution to that. So I didn't feel clear myself what that standard would be. So I would love to have, I don't know if this is a time to have discussion.
This is the time to have to debate the substance of, to have ask questions about the substance of the resolution, and then we will get into discussion. But once we're in discussion, we're not changing the resolution.
Okay.
Say that again? I think you can still. That's when you would make amendments to it.
All right. Okay. I have been corrected. We can make certainly at any point before we vote, someone can make a motion to make an amendment. Yes, Ms. Thompson.
I just want to clarify. So the superintendent, exactly what you're asking is, does this have teeth in the sense of, if we say that you have to do this, what are the repercussions for not? Is exactly what you're asking, correct?
Yeah. And
okay.
And I'll just add, I mean, in some cases, there's a ability to test out of it. So if the staff person is getting tested weekly, then that would be sufficient as an alternative to getting vaccinated.
Specifically, that's what the city's resolution calls for, right? In the city's resolution, people don't lose their job. They are required to test on a weekly basis and at their expense. And, as long as they're COVID-free, they can work. And if they are not COVID-free, then they can't.
May I respond as an author?
Mr. Burke.
I'm with Or that the spirit was hoping to discuss more fully with the board before making such a stance, and that overall the spirit of this resolution is one of cheerleading. Like, we're doing great already, let's keep going. And but that's why a termination is not part of it. But you're right, there's a gap there and that needs to be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Irish.
Since we're in the process of asking questions about the substance, I agree with Member Thompson's discussion about the $100 bonuses. I think we're at the stage where you've either made your decision or you haven't. And I'm trying to figure out, organize a raffle of meaningful prizes. Is that something, can you provide clarification to what a meaningful, and I understand your last comment was that of cheerleading, but.
I'm happy to take first swing, or if that's all right with you. That comes out of part the letter that we received from PEA President Carrie Foster about using positive reinforcement and what could be meaningful to folks. And it could be offers of PTO. It could be a certain board member who offers fresh food gardens to put a garden at a winner's house. It could be a month subscription to Blue Apron or one of the subscription business, just something that is helpful to people in a meaningful way. And we left it broad to allow for meaningful ideas to come forward, not to be too prescriptive.
Yep. And just one more question about what Superintendent just brought up with respect to the language with the cost. Staff who are granted an exemption must provide official proof of weekly negative tests with the cost to be covered by the employee. Is that language out of the cities? Was that, I'm sorry, I should be asking the authors, was that your language or language that was taken from the cities? implementation.
Or correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that came from several different policy sources of what people are doing.
So
Can I?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question for Melissa. Ms. Huey, is it, we didn't discuss this and I feel like we should know this. Is it lawful to ask an employee who has a medical exemption to pay for their own test?
So if we're talking about this being an accommodation for a disability, it could be. It depends on the interactive process that you're engaging with an employee. Having a flat out requirement when you're talking about that ADA requirement could be problematic.
So something like with the cost to be covered by the employee to the extent legally permissible or something along those lines would be a better statement.
Yes, and while I'm up here, I will say that I do think that you, I would hope that you would have an amendment to clarify this before you vote on it, because I think that it currently, as has been pointed out, it's ambiguous as to what would happen. And so this just for parliamentary procedure, boom, boom, boom.
Ms. Russell, thank you, Ms. Huey.
I finished just a couple more.
Absolutely. Sorry about that, Mr. Irish. Go ahead, please.
A couple things. Member Russell Better had indicated that the intent wasn't to be punitive. This seems punitive to me. So would this prohibit any staff who is required to get testing that doesn't have a medical exemption? They won't be afforded the resources of Greater Portland Health, as would any other student or parent.
So, I mean, we haven't discussed for Greater Portland Health whether or not we play a role in this. So, I mean, I think, again, it gets to capacity and what we want to use our limited testing resources for across the district. But I'm not saying that we couldn't do that. And depending on the numbers, potentially we could. But it's not necessarily been the intention of our site so far to prioritize what we're looking for is like a screening or surveillance system for people that are unvaccinated on an ongoing basis.
I'm sorry, Mr. Irish, can I just understand?
Can we stay with Mr. Irish?
But I'm trying to respond to what I wasn't clear what the not being able to access Greater Portland Health piece. I just didn't understand that. Could you clarify?
Well, I think it was mentioned that all those services, testing services from Greater Portland Health were provided at no cost, and that insurance claims were submitted to the insurance company for those who are insured, but would there be a copay associated with having to go through that process each week in efforts to maintain the standard? So the second seems to be a lot of moving parts, as indicated by council, and this is more procedure parliamentary, have we addressed this as being a first read or a second read? If so, or if not, can we, or? It just seems like there's a lot of
What we are proposing is because of the urgency of this issue, that we would act on this motion tonight. And what I asked earlier was if any board member objected to that, and if so, we could discuss it further. But the idea is that we would act tonight.
There just seems to be a lot of unanswereds here that I don't think we can address in the scope of time that's being asked.
I would suggest that there are some changes that would need to be made in an amendment, but those changes have been articulated. Ms. Russell, thank you, Mr. Irish. Ms. Russell Better.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to apologize that I think there's actually an error that might have had to do in part with having a Google Doc that I was making some changes. So the language about the cost being covered by the employee, I my intent was not for that to be in relation to the medical exemption. So I mean, that's not something that I believe Mr. Burke or I feel needs to be in there. There was a piece about other kind of exemptions that I pulled out. So I hope that explains why I would say that they were doing amendment or something, if that would be the process I'd have to do. I don't feel that the cost being covered is something that by the employee needs to be in there. So I apologize. I think that was sort of a mistake when I was making edits.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. I would like, if possible, to move to public comment, since I know we have many members of the public who have been waiting to speak to this motion. Unless there are final questions, and then I would encourage folks to think about and be ready to propose an amendment to address the issues that we've discussed would need to be clarified. So that we can, after public comment, during the discussion, ideally consider a motion, consider an amendment. And let me know if there's.
Quick question about that. Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, Ms. Thompson.
So I just have a question about that. It wasn't on our agenda as an agenda item, so people in the community don't know whether if they're dialed in this evening, they know we're talking about this at great length, and so they can come in for public comment. But I'm just curious as to people that would have liked to speak, whether it be for or against.
It is on the agenda.
Okay.
And
the first agenda I saw come out, I didn't see it on there, but
it was modified over the weekend to reflect the fact that there was a request from a board member to have, to actually consider this as part of.
I just didn't know how much public notification we had. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we have been very clear in previous conversations and over the past, few weeks, including in my, messages to the community, that the board was going to be taking up this issue at,
I saw that, yeah.
At this meeting.
Okay.
So that has been, I can't tell you that everybody in the community knew that it was going to be on there, but
there has been some.
Yeah, it was, it was put into the agenda, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to move to public comment. So members of the public, we just, so folks know, we don't have any members of the public with us here in person. So I'm going to just move through the Zoom queue. So in order to speak to the board, please use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is found either on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen or by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call the Zoom name of the public participant with your hand raised to address the board. Please start by stating your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to comment. So with that, I am going to start with Rachel Pargetter. Rachel, I'm sorry we weren't able to hear from you earlier. You can go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Okay, we are not hearing Rachel, so I'm going to move to Barbara and Rachel. We're going to see if it's a problem with our tech or your tech. So I will keep you high on the queue. So bear with us. And Barbara, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Figdor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. My child is one of the 32 children that was quarantined after 3.5 days of in-person learning on Friday. And based on my experience, I would just like to give some feedback. On the question of pool testing, given the diversity of our student body, I wonder to what extent there has been info sent in various languages, in backpack stuffers, robocalls, and so forth. I found out about it. I'm a pretty active member of the public school community, and I found out about it and signed up, but I haven't seen anything coming in the literature or information for my child. And I think if we want to do pool testing, we're going to need to really do some outreach to get those numbers up. And I wonder if once a week is enough. But that's a question for more scientific study. Second, once I learned my child was in close contact, I was given a call. The nurse was very nice to me, but did not offer any information about the Greater Portland Health testing facility. I found out about it through the grapevine. I tried to call them. They told me categorically that my daughter was not eligible. I spent all weekend trying to find testing in the community through private sector, could not find any kind of appointment for her. I finally found out this morning, again through the grapevine, that I could call the school nurse. So I think this information really needs to be sent out. And it was upon me to make the appointment through the school nurse, who was again very nice about it. But I feel like this needs to be something that is really very well communicated with the public. And finally, even though I understand that there are going to be breakthrough cases, Dr. Fauci and others have said that the best way that we can protect our children who cannot be vaccinated is by surrounding them by vaccinated adults. Is to then that means that we need to make mandatory vaccination among all of those adults that are surrounding them for children who are not able to be vaccinated themselves. So I would like to offer my support for that resolution. I understand you may need to make some amendments to clarify, but I want to give my support to that resolution that is going to go through today. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, we're going to hear from Krista Vo. Krista, you can go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Krista Vo.
Krista, we heard you for a minute and now we do not hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So one of my kids is quarantined and sorry?
Will you start by stating your address?
Oh, sorry. I don't know when I got cut off. Though, and I live, kids at Reiki is now under quarantine. And I just want to say that I think vaccinating is great. And I think that we should do everything we can to vaccinate everybody that we can. But every kid under 12 cannot be vaccinated right now. And they are being put in danger when the adults around them are not being tested, because there are breakthrough cases happening. And so I've heard a lot tonight about vaccination, and that's great. But I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. I think that kids need to be eating outside and more time until they have the opportunity to be vaccinated. We have great outdoor classrooms set up at every single school and to work really well. So I know that ventilation can be to make sure that kids can spend more time outside. I think will be better for everybody. And I'm also I know that availability of testing for everybody right now, which is unfortunate, but if we could prioritize testing our staff, that would really cut off where a lot of the transmission seems to be, or the exposure seems to be coming from. And then as far as kids being together unmasked, if that could happen outside, I would feel a lot better about sending my kids. Also, I would like some clarification about what is being communicated to families about when a child is being quarantined, whether their entire family needs to stay home, or as of right now, we were told that our other kids still need to go to school. So it seems like we are not necessarily ready to be doing what we're trying to do. And I am troubled by that. So I am thankful that we are prioritizing vaccinating the adults. And I think that's a good step, but I would like to see more action. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, next we're going to try Rachel Pargetter is connected via different method, although now I've just lost her. Give me one moment to see if I can find Rachel again. Okay. Rachel, please go ahead. Rachel, we see you, but you're muted.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Oh, hello?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I have to hold the space bar down the whole time, so sorry about that. I just wanted to point something out in the vaccination discussion, that everybody is talking about losing staff, but nobody is talking about the cost of the district if the unvaccinated staff continue to have to quarantine. So there is a cost there for unvaccinated staff to have to quarantine. And if we are going to allow the exemption to quarantine for those that are vaccinated, the best way to keep people from having to quarantine, both staff and students, is to have everyone who is eligible get vaccinated. To Mr. Rodriguez's point about rolling quarantines causing students to miss a lot of school, if those students are vaccinated, they are exempt from quarantine. So the fact that breakthrough cases are happening and vaccinated people are getting the virus does not make the exemption invalid. So there's a logical point there that's missing in this discussion. I am for a vaccine requirement for the staff, and I hope to see a vaccination requirement for students 12 and over as soon as possible. And if that is not going to happen, there are issues at Portland High School that need to be taken care of as far as lunch contact tracing goes and hallway contact tracing, as well as educational pieces about mask wearing and not physically touching each other during a pandemic, because the students are touching each other. And there does not appear, as far as my student has experienced, to be any monitoring of the halls with social distancing. And the students have to sit right next to each other at lunch. Last year, there was a table QR code system and a QR code system for students leaving the building, asking them where they were going to get lunch for contact tracing. That process has not been in place since school started. So there are definitely some issues that need to be addressed if a vaccine mandate is not forthcoming for both staff and students. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we're going to move to Nick McRae. Nick, you can go ahead. And please start by stating your name and address.
Hi, my name is Nick McRae. I am a social worker within the district at the elementary level. I just wanted to bring up some points that I thought would be helpful to clarify in regards to the fully vaccinated and maintaining vaccination for staff and what that will look like as the booster shots come out. And I know that seems like the far future, but for myself, many of the social workers, nurses, and OTs, we would be due in October if we were to follow the current 8-month guidance from your second shot. So I just want to make sure that that is thought of, and kind of our booster shots going to be considered for the fully and maintaining vaccination, and what that process will look like, especially since it seems like that will be delayed, and making sure that staff are able to keep up with that if that's what we're going to use for maintaining vaccination or not, and making sure that that is clearly communicated both within this and then to staff after the fact. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Mr. McRae. Okay, now we're going to move to Anna Fink. Anna, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you, Chair Figdor. This is Anna Fink, parent of 2 Portland Public School students, and I live on Cumberland Ave. I think we all share the goal, which is keeping schools open. And keeping schools open requires keeping COVID out. We've seen already in the first few days of school what even just a few cases can mean in terms of lost days, both for staff and students. Keeping COVID out requires vaccination, and it also requires testing. And I want to speak to both of those. With vaccination, the data shows, the science shows that we need to surround our unvaccinated kids with vaccinated adults. That's what the CDC says. That's what the medical establishments say. And if that's the case, then there's really only one choice. It's really hard. We are already understaffed. The people there, I'm sure they're unvaccinated who are good colleagues and friends. But we're really wrestling with a false choice here, because if we want to keep the schools open, we need to keep COVID out, and to keep COVID out and to keep it from transmitting in the schools, we have to surround our kids with vaccinated students. So sadly, the requirements for being able to work with children have changed, and we now have people in positions that they're not suited for. But that doesn't mean that we should contort ourselves and try to find ways to make it work. We need to put the priority of keeping schools open and keeping our kids in schools first. The second key there is testing. The only way we can keep COVID out is through testing. We are rolling the dice every day that we don't have testing. Many of the lost days we've already had could have been prevented if we had started testing on day one. So I really encourage you to think about and adopt pooled testing K through 12, so that we are not in the dark about where COVID is and where it's traveling. The vaccinated can transmit it as the unvaccinated can. Start it ASAP. I would actually advocate for not bringing kids back until you are able to test, and to do it twice a week. And the reason I would argue for twice a week is that the incubation period for Delta is different from Alpha. Alpha was more in the 5 to 7 day range. Delta is 3.7 days. So if you're doing it once a week, you're missing some new infections that are popping up in between and are contagious before you do the next pool. So I think you need to take a really hard look at testing and prioritizing testing. And I fully support a vaccine mandate for everyone in the buildings who is eligible to be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Next, we are going to move to Steph. Steph, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Elizondo, and I am a representative of Presente right now. I have several things I would like to touch base on. First and foremost, I'm concerned about Mr. Botana mentioning twice or thrice regarding the lack of space in classrooms at the high school. Also, you did mention that there's outdoor learning being facilitated. However, what happens during the winter months, as well as if we're doing the symptom checks in the morning and parents are doing that as well, how will we know the difference between flu and COVID symptoms? Additionally, Presente is also wondering as to why not more vaccination clinics are happening, and we are more than happy to facilitate any vaccination and testing. As well as another question that Roberto had mentioned about academic support for students that are quarantining. As a former educator, it's a very concerning issue that there is no plan in place in order to help these students get up to date. And last year was very difficult, and I know that many students around the United States fell back, and I was wondering if there's any plans of doing something with that. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steph. Next, we're going to hear from Andy Schmidt. Andy, you can go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, this is Andy Schmidt, and I live at 60 Berkeley Street, and I have 2 kids in elementary school. And I just want to reiterate what everybody's saying. We need lots of testing. The secret is having a quick turnaround. And we need a vaccine mandate for staff, because unvaccinated people are way, way more likely to contract the virus and to spread the virus. And if that happens, as we all know, kids get quarantined, kids miss school, and that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is they get sick and their family members, the kid might be okay, but they might infect a family member. And we all know what happens then. And it's just an imperative. There's no real choice here. It's going to be hard to staff the schools. I understand that. It's really hard, but having no staff is better than having staff that makes our kids sick and makes the other staff sick. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Next, we are going to hear from Alice. Alice, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please start by stating your full name and your address, and you can go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Alice Toohey, and I have a child. I live on Clinton Street, and I have a child at Longfellow. I just wanted to voice my support for mandated vaccination for the staff and the workers at the school. And also, I wanted to request that the children, that meals happen outside as opposed to inside. And also that if the children are going to be pooled testing with their classroom, if they can not have opportunities to mix, especially while eating, with other classrooms. And if that could happen immediately while we still have weather for that, while we sort out the rest of the stuff. Thank you so much for all your hard work and vigilance.
Thank you so much, Alice. Really appreciate your making the time. Okay, there's no one else with their hand up now, so I guess I'll say last call for public comment on the motion, and specifically this motion is to require all of our staff to get vaccinated. Okay, I see one more hand up, and it's John Thibodeau. So John, you can go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you, Emily. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, board chair, superintendent, and school board. I know it's been a ton of work and a ton of stress, and appreciate all that you're doing. I think that the point was made a couple of testifiers ago. Keeping schools open, keeping COVID out. I think that's what we're talking about, and trying to do everything we can to do that. And we're not going to be perfect, and there's no way to keep it out entirely, but we need to do everything we can, right? And that's what the CDC has put forward, this layered approach. And, with this layered approach, I think Dr. Walensky said the most powerful tool in that belt is to vaccinate all of the adults around our children who cannot be vaccinated, number one. So, it pains me that we're having this conversation, the first weekend of September, and we're talking about a November 1st possible deadline. It's frustrating. We're seeing the cases soar. They're expected to soar further. Schools are generally recognized as being an engine for increased community spread as we go into the fall. And I said this last time, I'll say this again, I do not hear the sense of urgency and frankly, taking this seriously enough. And I think we're going to look backwards in 2 months and be like, what were we doing? So I can't say how strongly I support the vaccine requirement for all staff. And also I would ask that you would amend this to include age eligible students as well. I don't know why you wouldn't do that as well. Taking every tool in the tool belt, and I don't know why we would want to leave some of our best tools in the belts and not use them. Around one of the issues about kind of these anecdotal musings about what unvaccinated people may or may not do if they're required. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that's productive. The best information we have is right here in the state, Maine Health and Northern Light, with thousands and thousands of employees, a significant number of whom said that they were weary of vaccine requirements, but when it happened, it was required. And according to both of those large companies, very few employees actually left. So that's the evidence we have. That's what we know. And kind of wondering about what people think, I don't think is helpful. I'll pose this question too. If we're concerned about vaccines being too political, then, let's just say the polio vaccine gets too political. Are we going to consider no longer requiring that for students? I think it's silly. We know this is an emergency. This is a pandemic.
That is the end of your time. Do you want to request more time from the board?
Yes, I would.
Let me see. Okay, I see Mr. Irish, seconded by Mr. Burke. All in support? Okay, it's unanimous. Go ahead, John. You have another 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. It's silly to consider whether it's political that we then don't do what we know is the right thing to do, what public health officials are urging us to do. That's not a reason not to do this, especially with what we're facing right now. So I would urge you to pass this tonight. We're already looking at November 1st, which is far away. I'm hoping the numbers tomorrow aren't going to be terrible, but I expect that they probably will be as far as new positive cases. And I expect that to increase probably for the next number of weeks. So, we're late, but we can still take significant action. I hope you pass this tonight. I also hope that you will look to expand the testing to all students and staff immediately or as soon as possible as well. That's the second most powerful tool in the tool belt, and we're just kind of leaving it in the belt. We got to get it out there. Time is going by quickly. So I would urge you to do that as quickly as possible and to expand it so that we can look back on 3 months and know that we took every step that we needed to take. We did what we were told to do by the CDC urgently. So I hope that you will do that. I think also other ideas as far as eating outdoors more often, better enforcement of social distancing. I think these are also very important measures as well that sound like they're not happening at the level that they should be. So thank you so much for your time. I know everyone's working very hard, but I ask you to make these changes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, we're going to hear from Michael Dixon. Michael, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please start with your full name and address. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Michael Dixon. I live on Monument Street, east end of Portland. I want to start just by saying that I urge the board to adopt this resolution. It sounds like there may be some amendments coming. I would say it's absolutely crucial to adopt it sooner rather than later. Amendments or not. I certainly welcome those, but one thing that I haven't heard enough of, and I want to second everything that Mr. Thibodeau just said, but we haven't heard enough since the beginning of this presentation about the best interests and the safety of the children. And it is absolutely a proven fact that vaccines among adults around those children is the most effective way to protect those vulnerable children. That is the most important thing, and I'm glad that we have good rates. But herd immunity does not mean that every child is safe. It just means you're not going to have a major outbreak. And as the superintendent said, there's a whole lot of discussion about what qualifies as herd immunity. And I guess I want the school board to consider, are you more concerned about losing an ed tech or a bus driver or 1 or 2 or even 25 staff members? Or are you more concerned about losing children? Are you more concerned about having to shut down your schools as they did in Aroostook County and Penobscot County and in Arundel recently? Which is more important to you? I'm glad that we have an overall vaccination rate in the elementary schools of approximately 94%, but that's not the 99% that the CDC estimates is actually in effect in Cumberland County. And it leaves room for improvement. And mandates work. That has been demonstrated. In Washington State, public employees and teachers were mandated to be vaccinated. Vaccinations went up 34% almost overnight. And that's true in Oregon, California, New York, New Jersey. They're seeing major increases thanks to these mandates across the country. We may have a smaller gap to fill, but mandates work. The ACLU has also come out with a very clear position that choosing not to get vaccinated is not a civil rights issue. If you're actually concerned with civil rights, then you're getting vaccinated. And I'm a little concerned about all the pretzel turning and weaving that I hear to try and accommodate people who are making irrational, unscientific decisions. I don't think we need to be enabling that anymore. Board member Burke mentioned the Millinocket example. I think that's a fantastic example. Millinocket.
Michael, your time is up. Do you want to request more time from the board?
I would, and I'll be brief. I won't need a full 3 minutes.
Okay, is there a motion to give Michael an additional 3 minutes? Mr. Burke, seconded by Ms. Trevorrow. All in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. Michael, you have 3 additional minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we've learned from Millinocket is that it's important to do everything you can do to be able to open your school and not have to go remote, but also that it's possible and that through personal, door-to-door, neighbor-to-neighbor, doctor to everybody in the community, and every doctor, not just Portland Health, but every doctor, you can increase those vaccination rates, and you can actually become a fully vaccinated hospital. You can become fully vaccinated schools. You can be a much more vaccinated community and a much safer community. I was glad to see the superintendent's recent communique celebrating the high vaccination rates, encouraging everyone to get vaccinated. But I was disturbed to see that he still had to use the word beg, begging everyone to get vaccinated. And I'm sorry that it falls to this school board, this body, because of the inaction of people above them at the state level to make this mandate. But I think the school board needs to step up and show the leadership that has not been shown in other places. This is the Delta variant of the virus. It is not the old virus. It breaks through the vaccines. It spreads more quickly. It is more intense. It is more aggressive. It has longer lasting effects. And we cannot afford to run these risks with our children. I also want to emphasize that this resolution, however welcome, and I very much welcome it, I thank the authors for bringing it to the board, and I thank the board for considering it without a second read. It's late. This is late. We are reacting late, and I don't find fault with anyone. This is all late-breaking information, but this is not hasty. This is late. We need to act on this now. And I would add that there are other measures that can still be taken too. Pool testing should, for example, apply to pre-K as well. And it should be an opt-out, not an opt-in. There should be more outdoor classes, not just eating outdoors, but more outdoor classes. I walked by my child's school the other day. It was 75 degrees out, beautiful sunshine, not a single person outdoors. We need to be promoting that, encouraging that, and I, as a parent, would be happy to help out in whatever way I can. I also wonder if the board and or the schools could find ways to share class family lists so that families can work together on this. Right now, we're sort of operating in the dark. I think it'd be great to know who the other parents are in our classroom and how we can help each other and how we can support the schools. But finally, and most importantly, we need this vaccination mandate. It is the most effective thing. The science shows it, the experience shows it, and our children need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we're going to hear from someone with the Zoom name of M. Goodma1. So you can go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and please start by stating your name and your address.
Okay, I'm really sorry that my name still comes up. I tried to change it, but my name is Madeline Goodman. I live at 63 Vanna Avenue. I'm actually a physician in the community, and I have a junior at Portland High School. First off, my son had COVID last week. He finally came off isolation. He was fully vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine as of June 1st. He was pretty sick, but he made it through. I fortunately have been vaccinated. I did not catch it, which was unbelievable to me because there was definitely close contact. So there are breakthrough cases with even children, or my teen son who was vaccinated in June and doing well. I have no idea where he picked up this infection, but he did, and he was ill. I'm also a medical provider. We are exhausted in the community. We are begging people to get vaccinated. I don't know how else to say it, but this pandemic is not going away if we don't do this, and we have to do our part. 99% of the people who are in the hospitals throughout the country are unvaccinated, and they are the ones who are in the intensive care unit on the vents are, again, 99% are unvaccinated. So if we can get breakthrough cases but get the kids through it, I think we have to do our part as a community. We have to protect our children. We have to stop burning out all the medical providers in the community, because once they're burnt out, there's nowhere left to go. I fully support mandating vaccination for anyone except for people who, for whatever medical reason, cannot do it. But otherwise, we have to do this as a community because it's not going to go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Next, we're going to hear from Reed. Reed, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name's Reed Hayton Hull, and I live on May Street in the West End. I have 2 elementary school students who attend Reiki. I want to echo a lot of sentiments that I've heard from other commentators throughout the course of the evening. First and foremost, thank you to the school staff and board for continuing to be vigilant. I also want to voice my support for the vaccine mandate for all school staff. I think that it is a job requirement that that all school staff prioritize the safety of their students, and getting vaccinated is the only way to, in this current context, is the only way to protect them to the maximum extent possible. Given that a vaccine mandate, even if enacted tonight, would not go into effect for apparently in the next 7 weeks, I also wanted to emphasize the critical importance of implementing pooled testing as soon as humanly possible, and also wanted to ask for increased outreach from the schools about pooled testing. As someone else commented, I have not seen a single piece of paper come in my kids' backpacks home from school about pooled testing. I think that is a critical communication tool, particularly for non-English speakers. And I would ask that be implemented as soon as possible. I also wanted to comment on one item that the superintendent mentioned earlier in the meeting about spacing and social distancing. And there was a reference to a requirement of 3 feet of separation. I'm not sure where that requirement would be coming from, because as far as I know, that the State Department of Education has not reinstituted that. I just really want to emphasize, I agree with everyone who has spoken about the importance of implementing all available mitigation measures. But I think that, and social distancing is absolutely one of them. But to the extent that social distancing requires kids to switch to a hybrid mode of education. I think that has to be an absolute tool of last resort. We need to have employed all other available mitigation methods, including increased testing.
Reed?
Yes.
Reached the end of your time. Would you like to request an extension?
Yes,
from
please.
the board?
Yes, please. I'll be brief.
Is there a motion for additional time? Mr. Irish, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. You have 3 additional minutes, Reed.
Okay, thank you. Just to conclude my comments, I think that Portland Public Schools cannot comply with its mandate to provide an adequate education to its students if it provides hybrid instruction. As a parent of somebody who was, I now have a kindergartner, so fortunately she was able to be in pre-K full-time last year, but I did experience hybrid education for my then 3rd grader, and it was not an adequate education, and it did really solidified the inequity in the system, and that's just not an acceptable alternative for providing adequate education for the student body, particularly when there are so many mitigation methods such as outdoor instruction, increased testing, that vaccine mandates that we could be employing. And that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Reed. Next, we're going to hear from Beth Taylor. Beth, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for your hard work on this and for hearing my comments. I only took a quick glance at the numbers.
Beth, could you start with your address, please?
Oh, yes. I live on Exeter Street, and I have a son who just started in kindergarten who accesses the special ed department, and a high-risk 2-year-old as well. So the thing that I wanted to touch upon is the numbers that I saw with the ed techs in particular. And, often these people work very closely with children who are high risk in a multitude of ways. And as a parent of one of those children, it feels very out of control and of what my child is going to come into. It is a large cost to lose educators, but the cost on our kids and the families supporting them, of being in quarantine, of having to pull kids from school, is just too great. And we can't keep on like this. We've heard that mothers are tired. Mothers are exhausted, not as exhausted as physicians and nurses. But mothers of special needs, kids with special needs, are lying on the floor every day. We need extra support, extra testing, and the vaccine mandate. Thank you all.
Beth, thank you so much for making the time to speak to the board. Okay, there are no more hands up, so I am going to go ahead and close public comment. Thank you so much to everyone who participated tonight. And we are going to move to board discussion. So is there board discussion on the motion? Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess a few things that I want to highlight, and I meant to do this earlier when we had the report on the vaccination rate. First thing is just to say how proud I am of the high rates that we've seen throughout our staff. I think this sends a strong message of the culture that we have within our buildings, and I think it needs to be highlighted. We have 100% of our administrators. Salute to that group and our staff. Way to be leaders. I also want to. There's a piece of information or material in our packet that I think is, to me, speaking louder than any other one, and that's the breakdown per building where I have the total of staff versus vaccinated. And specifically in our elementary schools, I don't see a building where there is more than 2 or 3 unvaccinated staff members that I would consider at least from the PEA, EdTech, and an administrators group. So as I look down, there's a gap maybe of one building that has like 3 or 4, but the other ones I see one in one group, one in another. So these are, when we say that our kids are in the environment where they're not vaccinated people, we're literally talking about 1 or 2 people per building, or a handful of people at best. So I just want to put that into context. It seems to me that we're spending a lot of time and attention on this, and I think it's valuable, and I think we've all expressed our agreement that the goal is to reach full vaccination rate. However, I'm disappointed that we're not putting more emphasis on, again, what I keep calling out, which is the amount of loss and educational time that our students are experiencing right now, and that we're not pushing the district to build a more robust support system for that, and that we're spending time here chasing 1 or 2 people in buildings. And I think that we can address those handful of people in each building that are not vaccinated by another means other than mandating it. I don't like ultimatums. I really don't. And again, when we're talking about such a small number of people, and some of them, by the way, are unknowns, as we heard earlier. So some of these people we just haven't heard from. So it just does not seem to be like the best way forward. I will say one last thing that I will say is, this might not be anecdotal, but in the healthcare system, there are 2 lawsuits against the Department of Health and Human Services right now because of the mandate on healthcare. And we have seen thousands of healthcare employees that have said that they would rather be terminated than get vaccinated. So we do see that happen in relation to mandates, and we're seeing it here in Maine. So I would not brush off the concerns about losing staff due to the mandate. I think there's reason to believe that could happen. And that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Is there other board discussion? And there are some issues we needed to resolve with the resolution. Now would be the time to do that.
Chair, would it be okay to also make comment first?
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry, so Ms. Russell Better, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a couple comments. One is just about the issue of looking at the staff members that we don't know. We don't know the reasoning, and we kind of had some back and forth about that. Like, I don't think we can find that, and I think it's, I guess what my understanding and seeing, I saw Dr. Shah speak in his address last week. And my understanding is that we have a lot of information to show that when we have requirements at workplaces, like with healthcare workers, a lot of people do get vaccinated. And is there some effect of potentially losing staff? Yes, that's definitely a risk. But I think it's not just the issue of having an aversion to getting the vaccine. I don't think that we can say that the folks that aren't vaccinated, that's the case. I think that often people don't get the information that they need, do have questions to be answered, but also that if you haven't been required to do so, there are plenty of people who wouldn't do it. So I just think that there's a way to say that is an expectation we have, and also to say that we don't know everybody's individual reasoning. And I think I want to honor each individual and have a way that we're having conversations, but I just think, I don't think we're going to know that. I just think that's not something we can know. And I just go back to that. One of the commenters said a false choice, and I feel like doing the right policy, I don't think we can not do that because of fear of a potential effect of staffing, which really is a crisis we have going on in our community across healthcare, education, multiple workplaces. So I just wanted to put that out there. So Chair, what I would you like me to just wait for other comments? Or what, I just want to ask process what to do about
I
amendments.
think now would be the appropriate time since there weren't a lot of board members indicating that they want to speak.
So would it be an amendment for me to just first take out the piece where I explained that that was an error in my editing? Would that be making an amendment?
Ideally, there's one amendment that incorporates any changes that are going to be made. And then you need you make that motion and you need a second.
Okay. So I guess I have some feedback from council about language, and that's a few sentences. So should I just go ahead and, okay. So my amendment would be to remove the line from, let's see, it's the last paragraph of the resolution where it says, provide official proof of weekly negative COVID tests. I would omit the piece of with the cost to be covered by the employee. I think that's sufficient, but I would be open to if we needed language of how the superintendent would be directed to do that piece. But my amendment would just be to remove with the cost to be covered by the employee. In addition, council's recommendation about the piece of that paragraph and the previous paragraph. I would amend that the language be changed to be it further resolved that by November 1st, 2021, staff either demonstrate they are fully vaccinated with an FDA approved or emergency use approved vaccine other than those with approved medical exemptions or I'm confused.
It looks like someone might have typed it up as
I did
as an alternative in the document.
I did put it in there, so everybody could look at that. Well, and I don't think everybody has access to that.
The public won't have access to it, so I can put it in the chat.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm accurate with the next sentence language.
Ms. Russell-Better, would you like me to share? Is this the?
Yep.
I want to make sure I'm sharing the appropriate thing. Would you like me to share this alternative language?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The PPS administration.
I think this addresses the three issues that were raised during the
So is everyone able to see that? And
can you read them out loud, please? Where?
Should I just read what you highlighted? Okay. So thank you, Chair, for putting that all together. So this would be in lieu of the last paragraph. It would instead state, be it further resolved that by November 1st, 2021, staff, other than those with approved medical exemptions, consistent with CDC guidelines, either demonstrate they're fully vaccinated with an FDA-approved or emergency use approved vaccine, or must submit weekly proof of a negative COVID-19 test. PPS administration will establish a process for verifying staff vaccination status, an exemption process, and testing protocols necessary to implement the policy.
Second. Thank you. Mr. Chavarro seconded the amendment. Okay, so now we move to questions on the amendment. Mr. Irish.
So maybe it's inappropriate. There are two other amendments you're proposing. Are you proposing two other amendments after this?
No.
But that's the full.
Yeah.
So we're not addressing or are we assuming that absent the language regarding termination is the sense that we are not pursuing that path on this request? Provided that someone does not follow through with these recommendations.
Yes. So this provides two options. You have three options.
And if
get vaccinated, you have a medical exemption, or you submit proof of a weekly present proof of a negative COVID
those are
test.
three options, right? And in the event that there's a staff member who doesn't exercise either one of those, will be
terminated.
Chair Figdor, just from Mr. Ir's question, I feel like that language probably does need to be in there more clearly, right?
No, I do think it's clear. And
okay.
We're seeing from our legal counsel for members of the public who are joining us on Zoom that our legal counsel is indicating that this is sufficient as written. It provides enough clarity. So are there other questions on the amendment?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
It's
Burke.
a question in seeking a friendly amendment to the amendment to include the sentence where it says, be it further resolved that the Portland Board of Education directs the superintendent to present the board with a plan for all staff to demonstrate that they have received full COVID-19 vaccination and maintain full vaccination. With the maintain full vaccination, do we need to say per CDC guidelines to allow for the evolution there with boosters and that sort of thing? And if so, can we include that as a friendly amendment in this motion?
I think that would be assumed, given that consistent with CDC guidelines is the standard that we're setting.
Stated in the amendment, this is not the amendment.
So it sounds like, well, I'll look to the people that brought the motion to the floor. Do they accept that as a friendly amendment?
Chair, I would like that as a friendly amendment because I don't think it's clear in that. If we are talking about booster, I think that's a part that's clear in the CDC guidelines about what does full vaccination mean. So I would want to be clear about what that means.
And Emily, if you're highlighting, I'm actually a sentence above, like just before the alternatively.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's receive full COVID-19 vaccination and maintain full vaccination per CDC guidance or guidelines. That's where I'm seeking the friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Yes, where your cursor is now.
That's not an amendment.
Earlier, she said.
No, it's not an amendment to the amendment, so.
Would have to be another amendment.
Okay, I'll bring it forward after this is resolved. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm confused about something. So Adam, to Ms. Aura Russell better, agreed with Mr. Burke. So if she's in agreement with that, and if Ms. Taboro agrees to the second of adding the CDC language, we could do it all as one, opposed to doing another amendment after the fact. As long as the second is fine with that. Ms. Russell better seemed to be fine with that. I don't know if the second isn't.
Even though the amendment is not of their amendment?
It addresses differently.
Ms. Aura Russell better can bring it forward in behalf of Mr. Burke as part of her amendment. And then the second, as long as she's fine with that change, we can do that, is my understanding.
Ms. Russell Better, would you like to change your amendment to incorporate the suggestion that Mr. Burke has raised?
Yes, Chair. So should I just verbalize that one piece?
Sure.
Okay. So in my amendment, I would like to include the language of per CDC guidelines to clarify what full COVID-19 vaccination entails. So that language per CDC guidelines.
And Ms. Trevaro, are you comfortable with that?
It's the previous clause.
It's above alternatively, the clause above alternatively.
Okay.
At the very end, Adam has made
I
the
see it now.
addition in caps and highlighted
Yeah,
it.
that's fine.
Okay, so now the amendment that's before us incorporates both of these sets of changes. So I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to move to public comment. So now we are, this is public comment on Ms. Russell Better's amendment to make some clarifications to the staff vaccination mandate. If you would like to address the board, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, found on the bottom of the webinar panel or next to your participant name. I don't see I see one hand. So Michelle, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
It's actually Madeline, but thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, I've been called everything. So, okay, I think the issue that you might need to address is it is extremely hard to find testing. I tried myself just in the private sector instead of going through my own physician, and it took me days. So I wonder how people who might have to submit to weekly testing, how you're going to offer that. Is it going to be offered through the school system? Because that's going to be hard to do. And they're going to need PCR tests, not rapid tests. You need the PCR. So how would the board propose that the people who would say they would do the weekly get it? Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we have another hand up, Nick McCrae. Nick, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, thank you. And thank you guys for taking into account some of those concerns about what it means to be fully vaccinated. I, again, just want to make sure that people are thinking about, currently CDC recommends that we do get the booster shot. And as I said, for nurses, social workers, occupational therapists, that means October, which should be before this November 1st guideline. But those shots it's not clear when they'll be available. So making sure there's a backup plan for that and going forward, kind of what the booster shots will look like. And if, because that's what the CDC is recommending for full vaccination, if that's going to be included, and just making sure that that is very clear in what you're deciding on as a policy and very clear in what is put forth to staff. Because I know that that's something that's already causing confusion. And I think it will continue to if it's not made explicitly clear, because things are already getting really confusing for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to close public comment and we're going to move to board discussion. This is board discussion on the amendment. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting the resolution this evening. While I'm not on the front.
We're not yet on the main motion. We're on the amendment.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to support the amendment as she's discussed, because the CDC guidelines, I think, is a good reference back. So I appreciate Mr. Burke bringing that up, because as it evolves and changes, that's what I think the medical field is also referring back to. And I'll wait for the rest back to the main motion. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, I'm going to read the amendment just so folks are clear about what we're doing. So first, we are clarifying in the second, the third resolve clause, we're adding per CDC guidelines. So it's, be it further resolved that the Portland Board of Education directs the superintendent to present the board with a plan for all staff to demonstrate that they have received full COVID vaccination and maintained vaccination. And we are adding per CDC guidelines. And then the second part of the amendment reads, be it further resolved that by November 1st, 2021, staff other than those with approved medical exemptions consistent with CDC guidelines either demonstrate that they are fully vaccinated with an FDA approved or emergency use approved vaccine, or must submit weekly proof of a negative COVID-19 test. PPS administration will establish a process for verifying staff vaccination status, and exemption process and testing protocols necessary to implement the policy. So please indicate whether you are in support of the resolution. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
No.
Mr. Burke?
To clarify, this is in support of the amendment, isn't it? Not the resolution.
Yes.
Oh, not the resolution.
This is just the amendment.
Yeah, still no. I still don't have any. No.
So that was a yes for the amendment.
No.
That was a no.
It was a no for the amendment.
Got it. Mr. Burke,
Yes on the amendment.
Mr. Irish,
No on the amendment.
Mr. Rodriguez,
No on the amendment.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Raro,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the amendment passes 6-3 with board members Bondo, Irish, and Rodriguez voting in the negative. So now we're back to the main motion, the resolution. And I would like to propose an amendment to the resolution. And that is to add, to make this requirement specific to building staff. So we would add in the third resolve clause, just the word building in front of all staff. So it'd be all building staff. And then in the last resolve clause, we would again add building prior to staff. So again, making this requirement specific to building staff. Is there a second?
Can you clarify exactly what you mean about the building staff?
Yes, so this would require, so let me explain. What I am attempting to do would be to make the vaccination mandate specific to our staff who are in buildings with students, so in our schools. So it would then not apply to, for instance, folks who are working in food service and not in our school buildings. And so this is, my goal here is to focus the requirement on our staff who are present in buildings with students. So again, it's thinking about this from the perspective of our students. Ms. Russell Better.
Chair, can I just clarify? So this would not include bus drivers?
This would not include bus drivers.
Okay.
I'll second so we can put it on the floor for the question.
Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Are there any questions on the motion?
Can you repeat it again, please?
Sorry?
Can you repeat that amendment, please, again?
It's before the word staff in the last two resolve clauses. It's specifying that it's building staff, the school building staff. So staff who are working in our school buildings. Are there any other questions? Seeing no other questions, is there public comment on this amendment?
I have a question.
Sorry. Okay. Before we get to public comment, let's go to Ms. Bondo.
I have a question for the last paragraph. I mean, I still don't get a clarification here. When we getting just on the building staff, and then if the thing, I still don't get confused here. If they don't show any weekly proof, I mean, they're terminated?
Yes.
This is the end of the story?
Yes. Okay, now, Ms. Bondo, is that the end of your question?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, so now we're moving to public comment, and we're going to start with Barbara. Barbara, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Barbara Mascareñas, and I did not tell you where I lived before. Sorry about that. I'm on Deering Street, and my daughter goes to King Middle School. I just want to voice my concern about bus drivers. That is a confined space, and I am worried about bus drivers not having a vaccination mandate. As the winter gets colder, I'm not sure how you're going to have kids in a bus with enough ventilation. So I'm not crazy about this amendment. I get it that it doesn't necessarily have to extend to people who are working in buildings where there are no children, but wherever there is a child who cannot be vaccinated, all adults must be vaccinated. that is what I think. And so I'm not crazy about this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, we're going to hear from Krista Vo. Krista, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Krista Vo. I live at 308 Danforth Street. I would like to echo what Barbara said. I'm very concerned about the idea of kids being in a bus with potentially windows not being open with an unvaccinated adult. I don't think it's necessary to exempt bus drivers or other staff that interacts with children. And I think that if there was an amendment, it should be that staff that does not interact with children could be exempt, but there's no reason that you can't expect a bus driver to also test weekly if they are not going to be vaccinated. I think that's a fine third option. And I think it undermines the whole point of having the adults vaccinated in the building if on the way to and from school, you're potentially being exposed anyway. So I am not in favor of this amendment.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, I see no other hands raised, so we're going to close public comment. Is there any board discussion on this amendment? Ms. Thompson.
Won't be supporting the amendment because I think our lowest rates are between food service workers and the custodians. So if we're just picking out just the bus drivers, and I agree with the callers that the bus drivers are greeting our children every day, and the food service workers are serving the food every day. So those are the two lowest, according to—
Ms. Thompson, I'm going to correct you here that the food service workers who are in our school buildings are included in our building data, not pulled out here.
This is central kitchen?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Okay. Well, I still don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Ms. Tarara.
I just also wanted to say that I'll be voting against the amendment with all due respect. I understand that it may correct the problem of kind of fear around whether we're going to be able to fill positions in transportation, but by the same token, it negates the greatest impact that this resolution could have. And, you know, our youngest students have to take the yellow buses. So they're exposed to those workers. And so I would like to see this applied to all of our staff.
Is there, and thank you, Ms. Tarara. Is there any other board discussion? Mr. Youssef.
Yeah, I will agree with Ms. Thompson and Mr. Evan. I think we either have all of them vaccinated or not vaccinated. And I personally struggle with this idea of what to make the decision, and the issue that the commenters mentioned, that you're looking at the staff versus our students. It's not seem right to me, because we all protecting these students, and those are not vaccinated are part of the staff that protect the students, and they're doing their part, although they're not vaccinated, but they're following the protocol. So what we have right now is a high percentage that giving us a lot of motivation to do more. So what I'm concerned is losing those employees and fall down into short staff and maybe remote, which is gonna hurt a lot of marginalized students. And I don't know if I'm going off the topic, but what I know is that a lot of marginalized students benefit from support, extra support, and one-on-one. And when we lose more staff, it's gonna be hard for us to fulfill those needs. So let me go back to the amendment. So I'm not voting for it because It's just trying to fix the issue, but not necessarily capturing the whole picture. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Is there any others for discussion? Ms. Bondo.
So the discussion is for the amendment because I just want to get something for Dr. Dieter, if I can ask some clarification.
Go ahead.
Yes.
All right. Doctor, yes, thank you. When I look at the cases that we have right now reported from the superintendent, and I think most of the cases been coming from the vaccinated staff, vaccinated people. So that means if I follow the protocol is that I'll vaccinate people or people being recovered from the COVID like 90 days, if they've been testing positive, they are not quarantined, right? So they can stay in the building or not.
So people who are vaccinated, who are close contacts, can still continue to come to school.
The close contact can continue to come to school, but the staff who been vaccinated but get tested positive, been quarantined.
So anyone who's positive has to stay home and be in isolation. And so Tina's here as well, so I can pass it off to her.
Yes, anyone who is sick and tests positive, whether they're vaccinated or not, follows the protocol of being positive, which would be to isolate and be out of school or work for 10 days.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Bondo. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify that because we asked that question earlier and we said that high school students who are not in the preventative pool testing, even if they have a negative test, we still have to quarantine for 10 days. That's what we said earlier.
Unless they're vaccinated.
But the superintendent was walking through the process of first there was 175 or so cases and we got close contacts and we got that down to around 30.
I'm sorry, I was just confused because again, the communication that was sent out to Portland schools, to Portland High School literally says that even with a negative test, the 10-day quarantine has to happen.
Again, I would like to see that because I don't think that's factual.
Okay, so we've gotten off point. Let's get back to the amendment. I don't see further discussion on the amendment. Ms.
Question for the superintendent. On the graph that we have for the central kitchen, excuse me, where it says 72%, the heading of it says non-school based all staff. So according to this, they're not counted in the school numbers. These are separated.
Those are the central kitchen staff. Those are the people that are at the central kitchen. Those are not the people that are serving meals to our students.
Okay, that's the clarification you were making. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in support of the amendment to the resolution and the main motion, which is to specify that this requirement would apply to school building staff. Mr. Superintendent, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Bondo?
No.
Burke?
No.
Mr. Irish?
No.
Mr. Rodriguez?
No.
Ms. Russell Better?
No.
Ms. Thompson?
No.
Ms. Trevorrow?
No.
Mr. Youssef?
No.
Yes, so the amendment fails by a vote of 8-1, and we are back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Mr. Rodriguez.
Just want to go back to the conversation about this being a cheerleading resolution and not a punitive one. I think that with a clear understanding that we will be terminating staff who are non-compliant, I think we need to redefine whether or not this is a punitive policy.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Trevorrow.
So I'm going to support this resolution. I understand there are a lot of logistical concerns around implementation, but I just feel that there's plenty of public health data out there to suggest that policies such as this are best practice, and that we are a public institution and as such have a role to play in advancing the goal of public health. And I sympathize with the sentiment that the most vulnerable, the youngest children in our schools are not able to get vaccinated, and they don't have the choice of who they're exposed to in their school buses or wherever they are in the district. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to take this step to require our staff to be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you. I will support the resolution. Again, the general spirit is applause and to keep going. And I understand the point about if termination is an option, but it's not. I guess it's not avoidable, and it's not the primary device by which we're trying to use to continue moving the vaccination rates. For me, it's everything that's been named in terms of who can be vaccinated and who can't, and who we're here for. And it's my children, all the children in the elementary schools and all their buildings that I'm thinking of first and foremost, as well as our staff and them as people, and to ensure that they're safe. And if they do get sick with COVID, that they don't die. And if this can be a way to help them make a decision that's hard for them to make, and then that's a benefit. There's also the meta level. I want out. I want done with this. And vaccination, or a lack thereof, is a driver of mutation. And we're working at a population level here, not just a district level. And that's also driving my support for this. It's also an equity issue for me. Why should those who live in our wealthiest zip code within Portland be the only one to have a 100% vaccination rate in their building? It's not the case that there's only one building in the district that has 100% ventilation or 100% masks. It's universal. And I think that's present for us here. And I would say, from my perspective, the weekly testing that could be an option for folks that remain unvaccinated could be the pooled testing. It would be a step towards extending the pooled testing beyond just our K through 6 population into other unvaccinated populations within the district. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat what Ms. Truro and Mr. Burke said, but I will be supporting this as well. And I think for me too, exactly what they said about the youngest, and also with my day job being at Maine Medical Center and not being in front of the patients, but also seeing the nurses and what they're going through, and how tired everybody is at the hospital. And everybody right now that presents themselves in our ICU are 100% unvaccinated. And I think the only way that we're going to do this is if I hate to be punitive, as Mr. Rodriguez said, and I also am concerned about losing staff, but at the same time, I think that we need to try to cut the numbers even more down, and they are in front of our kids, who are, the most precious to all of us. So I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm sorry, I just have to say it again. I don't think we can gloss over a statement like, okay, we can lose staff. This would literally cripple our ability to run an operation potentially. We talk about, like somebody literally said, we'd rather have no staff than unvaccinated staff. That means you cannot educate students. I mean, with this resolution, what we're gaining out of it is a strong push towards testing. I think that needs to be our focus. Again, no mention in this discussion about the loss of educational time for student studies. We had hundreds of students that were out of school, literally a day off within the first week, and no urgency behind that. Testing is how we get out of it. Mandates will not get it there. These elementary schools, we're talking about 1, 2, or 3 people per building. And we're going to lose them. And then guess what? Class sizes go up. Our ability to cover goes out the window. Then we have to enter bargaining. We're taxing staff members when they're already overtaxed. We cannot gloss over things like, so what if we lose staff? That is a critical piece of our operation. It is people. We literally have a people goal on our comprehensive plan. And we're about to pass a punitive policy on, as has been mentioned, the highest vaccination, like literally, I think Dr. Shaw tweeted this week, we are literally the highest vaccination rate county in the country. That we're sitting in like the hotbed of vaccination rates here. And I think that what we're aiming to do here is 100% commendable because we're reaching a really important goal, but we're going about it in a way that I believe has more ill effects than positive ones. Again, a handful of people in each building. I think we can get there without the mandate and without the risk of not running our operation. Let's be really cautious about how we do this, please.
Is there any other staff discussion, Ms. Bondo?
Yes. I won't be supporting the resolution because before those data, I was just say if I have something less than 90%, I can go with the mandate. But when I look at it, it's something surprising me. So that I feel like we have the willingness among our leadership staff and the staff to be vaccinated. And I think is a matter just maybe to increase the bonus and to keep encouraging them to understand the value instead just to say, okay, if you don't get vaccinated or you don't present any weekly testing, you get terminated. The life is getting so struggle and people going so really hardship right now, then we can go because 94% of elementary staff, 94 is a really high rate of vaccination. I mean, the positive feelings and positive that I can see here from teacher and staff, that they've been already vaccinated in something and I feel really then we can go over that. What I want to see is all the execution of the different layer of mitigation. Are we really going to the robust mask mandated for the high school? Are we make sure that we execute those policies the way it's supposed to be done? I mean, we follow social distancing. The pool testing, we make sure that everything is in place. Ventilation, all different layers of mitigation. That's why I want to see really the high rank execution of that to try to mitigate some of those layers of exposure. But the positively on the staff to be already 96%, 94%, I think it's just a matter to encourage the known, then it's barely less percentage here among our staff to make sure that our little kids who are not ready to be vaccinated, to be safe, but everything should go with all different layers of the mitigation. Then we need to reinforce and really well execute it. So I won't be able to support that resolution the way it is because there's a lot to be done. The quarantine, the robust, everything left behind for education is not well done. So we putting our students 14 days at home to be quarantined without any academic purpose, any education. People get vaccinated, they can be sick. I know they may not die, but it's not like all the people who got sick with no vaccinated, they are surviving also. So that means it's all balanced on different issues. We all want for the safety of our students, but it's a lot of different layers, and we really need to pay attention with the high rank of vaccinated staff in our public school system. I think then we can still encouraging the one hesitating to make sure that we can protect all our children. So I won't be supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Is there any other board discussion?
I just...
Mr. Youssef, I'm so sorry. I did not see you.
I should have done.
Please go ahead, Mr. Youssef.
So just looking at these numbers, I just want to say I'm so proud and grateful of the support that our staff are providing to our students and the reopening protocol. So what I think is that we have high vaccinated staff, in my opinion, and we need to focus on constraint safety measures and protocols and make sure that we implement those protocols. And I just don't want to see even a small number of loss of number of staff, because that is going to hurt all the students, specifically marginalized students. They suffer from remote learning. They didn't learn anything. Their parents had the hardest time that because of language, because of technology issues and problems. So I think we are in good shape at this point, and we need to focus more on how we use everybody to implement those protocols, and those will get us in a safe area. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Is there any other board comment? I'll just add briefly that I won't be supporting this amendment tonight. I share the concerns that Mr. Youssef and Ms. Bondo have raised in a different community where we didn't have such a high staff vaccination rate. 92% is just is such a good number. In a different community, I would be leading this effort, but I do not. Public policy is around. It is not around corner cases, and what we're dealing with tonight is corner cases. Public policy is about big, broad change to impact a system at large. What we're talking tonight is about a handful of cases, and I agree with Ms. Bondo. Let's pursue other means of convincing these staff to get vaccinated. We know from Ms. Stoddard that some of these staff are already in the vaccination process. They just hadn't finished their vaccination. In a different context, I would be very supportive of this, but I do not see it as an effective intervention in our school district, thanks to the amazing work of our staff getting themselves vaccinated and protecting our students and community. I see some real potential downsides, including not the possibility of having to go remote, which I think would have devastating impacts for our students at large, and specifically, and most, the biggest impacts for our marginalized students. So with that, we are going to vote on the resolution. So this is consideration and action to require vaccination for PPS employees. By roll call vote, please indicate. And Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
No.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish?
No.
Mr. Rodriguez?
No.
Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
No.
And Chair Figdor?
No. So the resolution fails by a vote of 5-4. And with Ms. Russell Better, Mr. Burke, Ms. Trevorrow, and Ms. Thompson voting voting for the resolution. Okay, so now.
Chair Figdor, I'm out of order, but may I comment? And it's pleasant comment.
Sure, and then the superintendent has a comment as well. So first, Mr. Burke, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say to my colleagues here, while I'm disappointed in the outcome, I think the process was good, and I think the important things that we need to keep our attention on to continue driving forward to safe schools were raised tonight. And I particularly appreciate Mr. Rodriguez's driving towards testing and being proficient in our hybrid education models. So I just thank you for this process. I think it was important this was aired in this way, and it went well, even though if I'm disappointed with the outcome. So thank you.
Mr. Burke, that's good to hear, and I appreciate your making that comment. Mr. Superintendent.
My comment was going to be very similar without the disappointment in the outcome. I think we walk away from this with a clear understanding that we need to figure out how to get our testing up and running quickly and effectively, and also to address concerns about students who are in quarantine. I do want to reiterate, and I know I've had this conversation with Mr. Rodriguez directly, that, a big part of our drive to say this is how we are going to run school for the time being is to get more students tested. And so if we're not incentivizing testing at all, then it's going to be really hard for us to get those numbers up to where we need them. So there are competing interests here, but I get it. And I do think that we understand that we need to, continue to drive towards more testing, extend it, and also make sure that we are addressing the needs of students who are in quarantine. And one of the great things about the testing is that it reduces the number of people in quarantine. And the same is about vaccination. But I hear you, and I really do appreciate the discussion today. I did say, coming into this that, I didn't have a recommendation because I really didn't have a recommendation. And I wanted to let the board, have this discussion. And, I really very much appreciate the way that you did. And, we'll move forward from here.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And I think that is a very good way to summarize the work we did tonight. And so I appreciate Ms. Russell-Better for bringing us the amendment. And thank you to all the board members and certainly to Ms. Stoddard for the tremendous work collecting all of the staff vaccination data and presenting the data in really helpful ways, looking at it from different approaches and making it so accessible to the board and public. So thank you so much. And thank you to the superintendent. So now we are going to move to our final items of the night. Just to say to the board that we're going to delay the rest of our agenda after we consider the personnel items. So we won't be going into executive session after we move to the personnel items, given the late hour. So this is consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, probationary. Is there a motion? Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Irish. Ms. Stoddard, do you want to speak to the motion?
Not a lot to say here, just that we're bringing forward 24 regular hire candidates for your approval.
Thank you, Ms. Stoddard. Are there any questions on the motion? Being none, there's no public comment on personnel items. Is there any board discussion? By roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in support of consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, probationary. Mr. Superintendent, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
And Chair Victor?
Yes, and the motion passes unanimously. Next, we have consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, 1 year only. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Irish. Ms. Stoddard, would you like to speak to this motion?
This is just 11 1-year only candidates.
Thank you, Ms. Stoddard. Are there any questions on the motion? There's no public comment on personnel items. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in support of approving the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, 1 year only. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
And Chair Victor?
Yes, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stoddard. All right, we are set to adjourn.
Before we adjourn.
Yes.
Just to clarify, can you just repeat, we had the high school choice presentation was moved, the Charter Commission workshop was moved, and our executive session for the
superintendent evaluation is also delayed. I'm planning a full hour for that discussion, and I think given that it's nearly 10:15, I don't believe the board will have a productive conversation, and I think we should allot the time when we have it. So we will prioritize having that executive session at our next meeting. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Trevorrow, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 10:12 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Have a